Hello folks, welcome back. In this presentation I'll be going through chapter 17 from my book. That's going to cover my twin flame union, Denver HQ for the Illuminati, the USA, the Four Corners, Atlantean Pylon Implant Network, maps, Jesus Christ, synchronicities, the Thunderbolt from the Gods, Glastonbury, Milk Hill, Stargate11, crop circles, Vitali, Succubi, White Dragons, cloaked ships, 9/11 Rapture event, Jesus Christ UCC1 filing, and the Great Pyramid of Giza, Ark of the Covenant, Stargate Dream. Okay, that I've already alluded to before. Right, so I had someone purchase my course on my website sometime early into 2022 who was from Denver, Colorado, who emailed me after going through some of my course and finding out that I was born in Brisbane, as she had her daughter who was living and working in Brisbane, and we also shared the same birthday. Okay, I received the email at 11:11 p.m. and knew there was something more to this connection, but otherwise replied and carried on as normal. As I mentioned, after having the Amanita muscaria mushroom experience, I was actively putting a call out to be reunited with my twin flame or soulmate or divine counterpart if she was here on planet Earth during this time, and for God Source and my guides to assist in bringing us together. I was still doing this on and off throughout 2022 before going to sleep. Well, one night I had a very lucid dream experience where I was holding hands with a girl, okay, to my left, who was short and had brunette hair, where I felt this synergy with, as if I did know her and she knew me, where we were trying to find a quiet place within a very busy setting, within what seemed to be a mall. We headed outside where it was a lot quieter and got to a point along the path where she stopped and turned to me and said, "I love you," after which we kissed, where it felt like all of my interdimensional selves had come into body in that one space-time location, making it one of the most lucid experiences I've had to date. After this kiss, things started to get a bit hairy in the reality we were in, where this giant wave of black goo penetrated the dream space with lots of other malevolent beings arriving, hurtling missiles and projectiles of all kinds of weird energy, which made us split. I remember running up to a hill to get away from this wave of black goo and came across some other guys who were using frisbees to kill some of these malevolent beings. I went to help them and then I woke up. Again, thinking, this is a very interesting experience and wondering who this girl might have been, but otherwise carrying on like normal in my life and keeping it stocked away to see what may result or, outpicture in this life. It must have been no more than 3 or 4 days after that dream experience where I got a random message from a girl on social media who was otherwise thanking me for my work that she was tuning into from my course and her website after her friend/boss/housemate had purchased it. This is the woman that obviously emailed me. The woman who purchased my course, whom she was living and working with, was the same woman who reached out to me in the email I received at 11:11 p.m. I immediately thought that this girl was the girl I had the dream experience with, but didn't reveal that until I got a gauge into her level of awareness, which she seemed to be and was very spiritual and clued up. So we had a lot of back and forth and deep conversations with each other for a few days before I revealed the dream experience to her and how I felt that it was her in the dream that I had experienced. She replied in shock, as that was the main reason she reached out to me, confessing that she had actually biolocated in my room while she was working, right, as Denver is 8 hours behind GMT, London time, where I was at the time. I was in England, in Wimborne, at Cuthberger, where she could see me asleep in bed, but knew something was going on in the astrals between us. She was shocked I had remembered/recalled the experience, which may, looking back, have revealed the nature of why this was done. She said she had heard my voice one time when her housemate was playing one of my lectures and said it was a sound tone she was familiar with. She knew about me before I knew about her, which her focus of attention on me obviously triggered this event to take place a few days after I was introduced to her through my teachings. As we spoke and learnt more about each other and our journeys, I revealed to her my dream I had about Hathor and my affinity to Horus, which inspired me to get a tattoo of both, one on each arm, symbolizing the divine feminine and divine masculine powers and the balancing of these two forces, which forms the basis of the hermetic marriage that happens within when uniting and balancing these two energies within our temples. She was again surprised as she had located above her bed in the room she was renting a papyrus replica of a famous hieroglyphic painting of Hathor and Horus holding hands, exactly how our dream experience manifested itself. You can see there on the slide on the left, that's the actual image of the papyrus holding hands. So yeah, very interesting synchronicity. By this point, I was pretty amazed and infatuated, thinking that this could very well be a twin flame / soulmate connection, especially given the fact I had been putting a call out and had my heart chakra open from the Amanita experience months before. Not that my heart had been closed, but it gave me a deeper feel and reinvigorated my desire for love, which was otherwise suppressed because most of my energy had been focused on surviving, adapting, and learning about everything to do with the occult, why I was getting attacked and how to defend myself better and how to heal, etc. My head and energy just was not in the game to even start thinking about romance, let alone socializing with anyone, as I was well and truly in hermit incubation mode of doing lots of inner work and investigations. Needless to say, I was definitely vulnerable given my situation, which this opportunity / connection seemed to have offered me a potential way out, reprieve, and support I was looking for. We eventually got to video communications, where she seemed really nice, very angelic, understanding, and easy to talk to with similar interests. I'd been planning to head away just after the Easter break for a little holiday somewhere with the money I'd been saving, where she suggested I come over to see her and explore this connection further. I thought about it and ended up heading over there. This is Denver, Colorado. I was a bit skeptical at first, as I knew I had been dealing with the dark forces that seemed to have evolved from the Greys to Satan, the Red Dragon, if you recollect, to succubus entities all throughout that 2021 period on a new moon for like 6 or 7 months, and to Luciferians with Crowley Jr., making his reappearance and stabbing me with the scarab beetle on my neck that I was still dealing with, healing, along with my other afflictions of this hybrid, fungal nanobot infection. And I knew Denver was a hotspot for conspiracies and a lot of evil activities going on, given some research and a few documentaries I'd watched prior as well. Okay, so it was kind of like a little bit of a red flag, but at the same time, let's just explore this and see what happens. Might as well have come this far, and you don't know until you try it, right? That was kind of like my mindset. So Denver, the HQ for the Illuminati, the USA, and the Four Corners. The airport itself, with how the runways are positioned, are designed as a swastika. Inside the airport, they use satire to deny the existence of an underground base housing aliens and demonic activity. They have statues of talking gargoyles coming out of briefcases, talking about the Illuminati, murals of apocalyptic scenes, capstone with the Freemasonic logo, and other weird statues and art pieces, none more so than the demonic-looking blue Mustang outside of the airport that the locals have nicknamed Blucifer, as it has red glowing eyes with bulging veins akin to carrying within its blood the essence of evil that penetrate its face and distend from its belly, as it permanently stands in the reared position, welcoming visitors to the mile-high city sat east of the gorgeous Rocky Mountains. Moreover, the poor chap, Louis Jimenez, at 65, who was responsible for designing and creating this masterpiece, died whilst making it, as part of the Mustang came loose in the workshop in 2006, which fell on him and severed an artery in his leg where he bled to death, imbuing the 32-foot tall sculpture with the sacrificial rites of passage to, no doubt, be hoisted in honor of the spiritual forces that reside there and that the Mustang represents. An interesting coincidence, the Freemasonic capstone was founded on March 19th, 1994. If you add up the numbers using each single number, you get March 1994 equals 1 plus 9 plus 1 plus 9 plus 9 plus 4 equals 33. And I had just turned 33 as well as this all started to happen. And the boarding gate at London Heathrow to Denver was also gate 33. Honestly, you can't make this stuff up. As the vaccine restrictions were fully enforced in America still, I took the opportunity to use my changed status in IDs I had made, which declared me a sovereign and diplomat to my own sovereign sending state of Middleditch, wherein I declared on the attestation form required from the CDC to be exempt, which being a diplomat appeased. That in itself was an initiation, going up against the tyrannical governmental acts and their ignorant agents enforcing them. It worked though, and I managed to pass check-in whilst they scrutinised my ID and documents which backed my claim and my exemption to travel for not being vaccinated, wherein they finally conceded and asked whether I would like security to escort me to the plane. These are the IDs that I otherwise do over on my website. Helps preserve your freedoms. They're called Certificate of the Identities. I do two. One's kind of more for your private estate under your mother's maiden name, which completely separates you from the birth certificate, crown surname of the father, the name of the father, right, and that Holy Trinity set up. And then here's the kind of commercial Postmaster General certificate of the identity, all right, claiming under your own hand and seal, using the post-road mechanics, ownership of that sending state, which is that sovereign surname of the crown, but only being identified again with our given name, okay, as you can see here. And then, yeah, basically got like a QR code that we can scan, got obviously my thumbprint, my seals, in order to pull up any and all important documents, right, that basically backs my claim of what this ID represents. Okay, so it does work, and that was otherwise a good case study that I did in order to prove that I can preserve and protect my freedoms during that whole ordeal of 2020, of them still enforcing these restrictions based on the pandemic of 2020. And otherwise, I think not too long after me going out to Denver, I think they actually relaxed the restrictions. So I have massive empathy for a lot of the people who are just doing their job in order to pay the bills and provide for their family, but I realize that they are all part of the test of initiation for folks in this journey. They are human and innocent at the end of the day, even though their minds might be plugged into the net of state-sponsored mind control propaganda. Most of their hearts are in the right place, and we have a responsibility to act honorably and assertively when knowing and enforcing what's right and just, even if they are uneducated. We can certainly help educate them when realizing that they are none the wiser to what is really happening and are not our true enemy. When you have this approach and come at it on a human level with these agents, they tend to behave themselves and ultimately will reflect how you conduct yourself. It's everything's a mirror, right? You can switch them off by being calm, confident, and assertive, which will go a long way when freeing yourself from the grips of the matrix. The key element of being confident, again, is knowledge. That's why it's so important to invest the time in getting educated, as that will take you a long way, not only in this life, but in the next. I mean, knowledge of the Templar and biospiritual technologies could ultimately take your consciousness and your body into the next transition where you transcend death. That's how powerful knowledge is. But we each must be responsible and prioritize what matters most for our evolution. I remember hearing a presentation where Denver would be overtly the capital of North America once certain events had taken place within the New World Order plan by the fallen angelic legions, where they would have split the continent in two down the Mississippi line as a result of utilizing the metaphysical beast, pulse, and APIN and wormhole technologies that would bond portions of the Earth to Phantom Earth and assist in the final Armageddon end times fulfillment agenda. Okay, Iyasha mentions this split in Voyages 2 on page 529, open quote. If the United Intruder Resistance was successful in the One World Order plan, parallel Earth Stargate11 and corresponding PH1 grid line will be used to rip Earth's planetary shields apart, culminating in splitting of the North American continent at the Mississippi River line. UIR hopes to make Denver, Colorado, the new control center and US capital. End quote. Very interesting. She also mentions how the North American continent had been the favored field of operation for the fallen angelics, as they did not have many arc gate interface sites there that allowed for the anchoring of the Crystal River host down through the eternal suns, which downstepped through the deity planes, Aquarii Matrix, Acriel, which is M31, Andromeda, and then down through our universal solar and planetary Templar. This is probably why America has been a hot zone for UFO activity, sightings, experiences, and many conspiracies involving aliens, deep underground military bases, Area 51, etc. What's more, Denver has a lot of defense contract companies like Lockheed Martin located there, along with the supposed claim that most of the USA's nuclear weapons are held within bases in the Rocky Mountains, as strategically they are well positioned in the Midwest. So there you can see a photo of the Lucifer, Blue Stallion, okay, which is right outside the airport, and then the mockery of the satire with kind of the plausible deniability, turning it into humor, but otherwise, letting us know that it is the truth. And then, bird's eye view of the swastika runway, which is, claimed to be designed to counteract the different winds that happen there. But yeah, like I said, it's kind of like probably appeasing, again, two different processes as seen from your spaceship up in outer space. That's definitely going to be marking, a strategic communications in regards to these symbols to other forces who are observing, things and sites and particular ley lines and placements of particular structures such as airports like this, when letting others know who's in control and who's in charge here. You also have the fact that Denver itself is a mile high at the base of the Rockies, making it that much closer to the field of operations in space for visiting craft. Boulder, a city north of Denver, is also littered with Freemasonic plaques on building corners throughout the city, again re-emphasizing their hidden influence and control. It's interesting to see this dichotomy from the likes of Iasha and that of a Freemason, Manly P. Hall, where in the latter states, open quote, not only were many founders of the United States government Masons, but they received aid from a secret and august body existing in Europe, which helped them to establish this country for a peculiar and particular purpose known only to the initiated few. The Great Seal is the signature of this exalted body, unseen and for the most part unknown, and the unfinished pyramid upon its reverse side is a trestle board setting forth symbolically the task to the accomplishment of which the United States government was dedicated from the day of its inception, close quote. A statement that leaves you hanging like a gerund noun, constantly running around in your head trying to ascertain what the truth of the order really is, cloaked in secrecy and mystery, but with an air of optimism and hope, when in reality that could not be further from the truth. Okay, whereas Iasha writes about Freemasons, open quote, America was founded by the Luciferian Hyksos Knights Templar Anu Melchizedek Illuminati, who now go by the name of Freemasons, okay, on behalf of Galactic Federation and the Pleiadian, Nibiruan, Anunnaki races of the 9560 BC Luciferian Covenant. Competing Illuminati groups and their stellar co-conspirators intended to use the North American Gruau Point, which is Sarasota, Florida, and their holdings of Stargate11 Europe, Stargate 4, Egypt, and Stargate 10 Middle East to gain full control of Earth's Templar on behalf of their stellar contracts during the 2000 to 2017 stellar activation cycle. And the USA has been, since the formalization of the Luciferian Covenant in 9560 BC, Atlantis, the intended arena within which the fallen angelic final conflict drama, Battle of Armageddon, is planned to unfold, making way for the rise of the One World Order, close quote. I think based on all of the evidence we have revealed thus far, and my first-hand experiences, it is safe to say that any affiliation to a secret order, such as the Freemasons, and any order for that matter that demands taking an oath of silence, is definitely operating through veils of deception that preys on the desperation of the ego and faulty gene codes from the Leviathan races, who are easily coerced and susceptible to the temptations of such an order, which uses its members/initiates as pawns within an inner and outer circle recruitment and grooming filtering process in order to, ultimately, serve the agendas of the fallen angelic races. As Jesus said, even in the Bible in Matthew 10:27, open quote, what I tell you in darkness, that speak ye in light, and what ye hear in the ear, that preach ye upon the housetops, close quote. As we have seen, many within the order have no idea what the true agendas and purpose are for the establishment. Instead, it hides behind an egalitarian front, which massages the intellect with abstract, woolly, and oftentimes reductionist perspectives of mysteries that can and have been explained through science, given what we have covered with the Cathara and the Keylontic sciences of how creation is made manifest. They often position people in precarious situations to fulfill their needs through the fear of death when speaking out under the oath they took, as well as through the rituals they do, honey traps, and blackmail material they would gather as leverage to make these individuals do their bidding when called upon for fear of losing their dignity, status, life, and bennies they would receive from being a part of the New World Order gravy train. It's a pernicious agency that reveals itself through symbolism as part of their coded language, as we saw with Mr. Fauci during the lockdown policies of 2020, with the hidden hand signifying the Freemasonic involvement in the planned pandemic. Interestingly, he later confessed that his decisions were not based on science, and it just appeared when it came to the social distancing rules and mask mandates when questioned before Congress in 2024, revealing this hidden hand and the fact that he was just another puppet fulfilling orders higher up the chain within this organization. This seems to be an all too common tactic of revolving door politics and actors on the world stage, where they use individuals in their public, insured and licensed capacity to be the front man or woman for decisions that are made long before they take office, where they are also used to face scrutiny over controversial decisions and handling of events when in office, as if this person had any real power over the decision-making processes that gives the general public a sense of justice being served and a face and name they can pin their frustrations on that acts as a mechanism to discharge the public's concerns and frustrations. It's the old problem, reaction, solution tactic that I see continues to repeat itself within these institutions that has many a citizen marching along to the beat of their brainwashing drum. These actors who come into office, again interesting with office, is also phonetically similar to the Greek word for a snake in OPHIS, which is office. Okay, so the actors who come into office play their part within the script they call acts, which, as we have researched from Pierre's work, stems from stratos, which is an invading army that instructs the etymology of statutes and acts, who are often used to serve their dues in order to gain access to high levels when doing favors for the order. Many faces and names come and go with it. The public believe there is a sense of change, but the agencies and forces behind these low-level Freemasonic pawns are just that, pawns for entities within hierarchies of the fallen angelic factions whose agency and core agendas never change. Moreover, these charlatans often end up in very lucrative positions in big multinational corporations if they have done a good job in office. These tactics also apply to people outside of the order in order to influence and control with how our commercial and societal system is set up, an incentivized system that mostly promotes those who are willing to shortcut and harm their fellow human family, as we saw with how the Talmudic Jews see the Goyim, which are the non-Jews. As the famous quote by J.F. Kennedy exposed the very nature and pernicious scheming of these agencies and secret societies before being assassinated, was a stunning example of the very real presence of these invisible forces that have been meddling in the affairs of humans on Earth and throughout this time matrix. Open quote. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are as a people inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by initiating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is a very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment, that I do not intend to permit to the extent that it is in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. It requires a change in outlook, a change in tactics, a change in missions, by the government, by the people, by every business or labour leader, and by every newspaper. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned. No rumour is printed. No secret is revealed. It conducts the Cold War, in short, with the wartime discipline no democracy would ever hope or wish to match. Close quote. Pierceback summarises quite well these forces that direct the ship of state. Open quote. A deceiver of humanity, the reptile contrives social, religious, political and sexual boundaries. Ideologically, it governs and opposes Labour and Conservative, capitalist and communist, fascist and liberal, green and globalism, compartmentalisation of all the religions as regulated through the partition of the priesthood. This includes the Sunni and Shiite, Catholic and Protestant, Pharisee and Sadducee, Hinayana and Mahayana ad infinitum. Masonic societies describe this duality as order ab chaos, which means order out of chaos, a motto attributed to the Shaitani, which is the adversary or opposer. Close quote. His views seem to categorize these forces acting in unison, compared to Iyash's claims about competing fallen races battling amongst one another for dominion. Albeit, Iyasha has explained that in recent times, most of these fallen forces, not all, have banded together to form the United Intruder Resistance. Regardless of the finer details involving the who's who of these fallen, races, they all fall under the category of anti-Christos mentality, whose ideologies, hierarchies, and agendas share a common goal, which is dominion rather than freedom. Okay, and you can see in the seal on the $1 bill, Annuit Coeptis Novus Ordo Seclorum is their kind of hidden message of their New World Order. And if you draw a pentagram, you can see the word Mason connects at those points. So in Matrix 2, the abduction and manipulation of humans using advanced technology by Valdemar Valerian, it has some great finer details of this interstellar drama with the races, agendas and technologies that are being used from leaked classified documents, contracts and reports from government agencies, as well as testimonies from other abductee experiences that certainly rhymes with this theme we have uncovered, albeit again, without mention of the universal Templar mechanics and true origin of the human species that is detailed from the MCO AIMCC teachings. There is a huge amount of material that originates from the USA in regards to ET government contact and contracts, underground alien bases, particularly in the Midwest region of what's called the Four Corners, okay, where Denver is located, as well as countless sightings, abductions, and MyLab experiences. Okay, so you can see here a few diagrams taken out of that book, Matrix 2, the abduction and manipulation of humans using advanced technology. And you can see an underground coal mine, level 1 red guard, which is basically depicting an entrance to a hidden base within the Rocky Mountains. And here you've got major underground alien related bases in the southwestern US. On page 102, there is a report of the service to self alien species, which mentions tactics of establishing the New World Order and their control over the governments, open quote. They control governments by picking up likely subjects and implanting them, manipulating their careers and elevating them within the societal structure to positions of power and or a position as a leader of public opinion. When a human candidate becomes controlled by reason of inculcation therapy, they often knock the individual out of his head, install the human's consciousness, individuality, while an artificially created intelligence is placed in the head of the candidate's body to carry forth covert operations against the human populations. Humans implanted as controls are indoctrinated into the belief that they are superior to other humans. The aliens then give the humans technology to help them to obtain weapons for use against each other. All key personnel are implanted and controlled by the alien species. If the elite are successful, they are used as priests and caretakers of the slave planet. In order for humans to extricate themselves from the covert sinister alliance between the CIA and the Regal, which has occurred without the knowledge and consent of the mass consciousness, the people must regain control of the government, which is a government for the people and by the people, close quote. Okay, so yeah, again, it's quite interesting books, worth reading. It kind of goes into more micro technologies and little stories that are going on with the control structure and the Regalians. He calls them the Regal, but these are otherwise, yeah, the Zeta Regalian, right, which is part of the Draco Zeta alliance of their New World Order push here on the planet. There's certainly many different tactics and technologies they use in order to, administer control manipulations. Iyasha talks about the Fatali, which are meant to be the worst of the worst, the highest of the Black Hole 4 races that are now in charge, and they come in via body snatching. Okay, so they're using direct infiltration through body snatching, coming into and possessing individuals that are quite high up within the governments and corporations too. Okay, so you've got the more organic kind of pushing in of other soul consciousnesses, okay, that are part of the Black Hole 4 matrix, the Fatali, as well as many other technologies, implants, and what was mentioned here, in order to get people to do the bidding of their controllers. So you can see here out of the book, there's like a little article of these underground maglev train systems that connect all the way across at least the United States, if not possibly the Earth. Okay, and these are kind of maps with remote viewers and leaked documents, map of the United States, mass anomalies. Okay, so you've got animal mutations, high UFO activity, possible portal vortexes, possible UFO bases, and suspected inner Earth entrances. Okay, and then obviously here you've got the RAND Corp has devised a rapid transit system to get you from Los Angeles to New York in half an hour for a $50 fare. Existing technology makes such a system feasible, so does a cost analysis. The idea of high-speed train travel using electromagnetic suspension was first put forward in 1905 and actually patented in 1912. The essence of the idea is to dig a tunnel more or less along the present routes of US Highway 66 and 30. The tunnel would contain several large tubes for the east-west travel of trains that float in magnetic fields, moving at top speeds of 10,000 miles per hour. This train, or tube shuttle, should be big enough to carry both passengers and freight, including large containers and automobiles. On the main line, there would be intermediate stops at Amarillo and Chicago, Feeder lines would meet the main line at both locations. There also would be subsidiary lines coming from such cities as San Francisco, Boston, and Washington. The tunnels are not as expensive to dig as people think. The most expensive thing about surface routes is in acquiring rights of way and removing buildings, etc. The tunnel would not incur this expense. The tunnel could also carry, in the tubes, many of the utilities now strung across the countryside on high wires. This was actually posted in the Los Angeles Times back in 1972 of June 11. Okay, again, which is kind of like soft disclosure of technologies that more than likely had already been built and implemented and are being used. So here we have more maps taken out of the book. Okay, so this is the four corners, and then you've got some more phenomenon heaviest UFO reporting. So there's a lot of activity going around that area, which obviously where I was led out to in Denver, Colorado. And again, map based on computer analysis of countries in the counties in the United States where sightings have occurred with greater frequency than might be expected on the basis of population density. And so there's definitely a increased sighting amongst the four corners, especially in Denver, Colorado. Which, yeah, the four corners are Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, and Utah. So here we have, taken from Voyages 2, the Atlantean Pylon Implant Network maps, okay, abbreviated to APIN. And so here you can see, obviously overlaid on the map of the Earth, when scanning with the photoradionic scanning equipment, this is otherwise what you would see. And they're kind of designed and implemented to be in the shape of these particular animals, okay, which is associated with particular races. So we can see here the dragon intruder apin, okay, which is linked to the Omicron draconian dragon moths inserted in 75,500 BC, created by the Omicron draconian races of Alnitak and Alnilam, Orion at the end of the Anu occupation, just prior to the Inner Earth rebellion of 75,000 BC, runs on reverse D10 current and connects Earth's Templar to the planetary shields of Phantom, Alnitak, Orion. Rebel Omicron draconian forces hope to use the Dragon Apin to defeat the Guardians and the UIR in the 2017 Stellar Activation Cycle Final Conflict drama. Then we have in here as well, woven in, you got a Falcon Apin, okay, which is linked to the Zeta Regalian Draconian agenda, which is put in there in 10,500 BC, created by the Zeta Regalian races of Alnitak Orion during the 10,500 BC Luciferian conquest, connects to the Falcon wormhole, Phi X wormhole port interface systems, okay, which is, you know, around that Bermuda Triangle area, runs on reverse D10 current and connects Earth's Templar to the planetary shields of Phantom Earth. The UIR hopes to use the Falcon Apin to take over the Dragon Apin of the rebel Omicron Draconians to ensure UIR victory in the 2017 Stellar Activation Cycle Final Conflict drama. So we got here, intruder Apin systems will be rendered inoperable by 2012 with successful activation of the GA Guardian Alliance, Four Faces of Man, Great White Lion, and Golden Eagle Elpin Apin systems. So you here have on the little box, it says if the UIR was successful, and this is where I got the little snippet from that we read out earlier. If the UIR was successful in their One World Order plan, parallel Earth Stargate 1 and corresponding PH1 grid line would be used to rip Earth's planetary shields apart, culminating in splitting of the North American continent at the Mississippi River line. Okay, UIR hopes to make Denver, Colorado, the new control center in US Capitol. Okay, so that's where I pulled it from the book, which is quite interesting. And this kind of links into an experience I had later, which we'll get to, which was kind of almost trying to seed that into my consciousness, that timeline of the split, which is kind of tied into also the rapture as mentioned in the book of Revelation, which otherwise is not a good event that Christians have been praying for and hoping for to arrive. If they truly knew what it was linked into, they certainly would not want it to come to pass, basically, when understanding that it is tied into their whole goal of ripping portions of Earth and its populations into their black hole phantom matrix. So we have the Anunnaki and Andromi Nephite intruder apins. Okay, so we've got the top right there, we've got the Serpent apin, which is inserted in 25,500 BC, created by the Pleiadian Samjays Luciferian and Nibiran Thoth Enki Zephelium and Enlil Odidicron Luciferian agenda Anunnaki races during 25,500 BC Lucifer rebellion, runs on D4511 reverse current, connects to Phantom Nibiru, Tiamat and Lyra Avalon via Phoenix wormholes, uses the spike site implant technology, links with the NDC grid, which is the Nibirian dialect crystal grid, and PSG3 Chihuahua, Mexico, and Stargate 4, Giza, Egypt. Modern activation began in the 1700s. Then we have the dove and the olive branch APIN Jehovah Anunnaki, created by the Jehovah Anunnaki bipedal dolphin people of Phantom Sirius A, Arcturus, Orion during 25,400 BC. Lucifer Rebellion connects to Phoenix wormhole unnatural 7 Jehovah seals, okay, which are not shown here on the map, and runs off PSG1, parallel Earth's south pole. Links with pro-Jehovah Necromaton Andromi Nephilim White Eagle, hijacked Golden Eagle APIN, runs on D7911 reverse current, uses trumpet pulse technology, connects to Phantom Arcturus, and modern activations began in the 1950s. Then on the bottom right, we have the Phoenix APIN, Pleiadian Nibiruan Anunnaki, created by Pleiadian Samjays Luciferian and Nibiruan Thoth Enki Cephalium, and Enlil Adedicon Luciferian agenda, Anunnaki races in 25,500 BC, Lucifer Rebellion, runs on D4511 reverse current, connects to Phantom Nibiru, Tiamat, and Lyra Avion by Phoenix wormhole, and uses spike site implants again, and is linked with the NDC grid, Stargate 4, Giza, Egypt, and modern activation began in 1972. Then we've got in here embedded a little one that you can see kind of going across Asia and connecting into the Middle East is this Guardian Alliance, Maharaji, and Altair Antares, Rashayana, 22,500 BC, hijacked by Omega Centauri, Centaur Intruders, again 10,500 BC, Lucifer Rebellion, and the Guardian Alliance Reclaim runs on D12 Amarais current. Not really too clear at the moment who has control of what, okay, because there is this like override with the failsafe that's coming in, that's kind of activating deeper levels of the plasmas, okay, that's otherwise interfacing with 3 sets of gates that we'll get to in the next chapter when going through the 777 internal eternal fold of external creation, okay, and what's happening with this so-called failsafe, okay, that's kind of uniting under the divine protectorate, uniting these 3 passageways that were kind of seeded into Earth, connecting back up through, you know, our incarnational descent down here organically, all the way up through, you know, Andromeda, and then the Aquiferian matrix, and then back into the deity planes. Okay, so not really too sure whether these are still obviously having an effect on Earth with this invisible war drama, but there's a deeper layer now that is on the scene in regards to the battle with the plasmas. Okay, that certainly is preceding all of this kind of light level external creation technologies, but it's still being used to try and, yeah, obviously gain control of certain portions of the Earth. Okay, so I'm not too sure at this time, up to date with regards to who owns what with this grid APIN system technologies, because it's not really covered. It's more going into the deeper layers of the activations and what's happening under the failsafe with Yasha's latest dispensations. What's interesting, that Maharaji kind of bull APIN is also linked into Antares. Okay, so it seems to be a portion of Antares that otherwise is linked into the Guardian Alliance. And if you recollect in the Jehovian, I think Illuminati intruder races, we saw that Antares, or at least Phantom Antares, was linked to the Jehovian Anu Elohim pure strain Anunnaki, right? So interesting that there's 2 kind of flavors with that star Antares, which is obviously at the heart of the Scorpion, as we've dissected. Should be well familiar with by now, given my activations and what it's tied into with the occult and symbolism, and that time of year, November, right, with certainly my initiations and trials and tribulations. So here we have the Golden Eagle APIN, which is linked to the Guardian, Seraphi, Seraphim, Avian, Hominid, Ceres, and Ceres 5.5 million years ago. So top left there, the Seraphi, Seraphim, Avian, Ceres, and Ceres founders of Mintaka Orion, Procyon, Alcyone, created the Guardian Eagle APIN 5.5 million years ago in cooperation with the Elohi Elohim's creation of the GWL APIN, which is the Great White Lion APIN. The Golden Eagle APIN is Guardian of the Horizontals, which is Earth's Templar ley line system. The Golden Eagle APIN will be reclaimed and activated by its Guardian Alliance Seraphi creators in December 2003 via activation of the Ayani's FFM LPIN. This will prevent the UIR from using the GE as a subliminal mind control weapon. During the Lucifer Rebellion of 25,500 BC, the GE APIN was overtaken by the Necromaton and Andromi Nephilim intruder races of Andromeda, Alpha Centauri, and Orion. Presently, the GE APIN is being used by the UIR to broadcast subliminal mind control scalar programs and false channel contact programs such as the Archangel Michael Matrix. Okay, very interesting. Now, what you will find is when you read Voyagers 2 as well, there are certain fallen APIN systems that have been reclaimed by the Guardians too, such as the Dragon APIN and the White Eagle APIN, etc. So here we have the Great White Lion Guardian APIN system, and top left there's the Elohi, Elohim, Leonine, Anahazi, founders of Amritana Lyra. And Sirius B created the Great White Lion APIN as part of their Earth Templar Crisis Intervention mission after the Electric Wars 5.5 million years ago. The Great White Lion runs on a D12 12 code pulse and links Earth's planetary shields to their divine blueprint, D12 pre-matter template at Lyra Aramitana. We've got bottom left there, we've got the Great White Lion APIN was rendered inoperable when Omicron Draconians raided Earth during the 2008 216 BC stellar activation cycle, causing Earth's Templar to run on an unnatural D10 code pulse. In 46,459 BC, the original Sphinx portal fortification monument of Egypt, which originally had the face of a lion, not a man, was co-created by the Anahazi Leonine founders and Anunnaki races whom had joined the Emerald Covenant. The Sphinx design was chosen to commemorate the intended reactivation of the Great White Lion APIN through fulfillment of Earth's Christos realignment mission. And top right there, we've got the Great White Lion APIN is guardian of the verticals, the protector of Earth's 12 vertical axial tonal lines. When activated, the billions of minute crystal pinon implant microchips of the Great White Lion and those of its Golden Eagle APIN companion from a scalar field that holds Earth's fragmented planetary shields together during stellar activation cycles to avert pole shift and prevent Earth from being drawn into the phantom matrix black hole system. Okay, in the bottom right, we've got the Great White Lion APIN will begin 12 code pulse activation April 2003 for the first time since 208 216 BC. By activation of the Ayani Indigo's Four Faces of Man ALPIN system. Successful activation of the Guardian's APIN ALPIN systems will prevent pole shift and further intruder invasion during the 2017 stellar activation cycle. So here we have the Four Faces of Man, Guardians of the 12 Pillars ALPIN system. Okay, you've got the Guardian, Ayani Indigos, Maharaji Azarites, and Elohi Elohim. Okay, around 22,500 BC to 22,326 BC. So top left there, we've got the Four Faces of the FFM ALPIN that run through Earth, Tara, Gaia, are Guardians of the Four Corners, or Angels of the Four Corners, North, South, East, and West. Two other sets of Four Faces ALPINs exist, one in parallel Earth, Tara, Gaia, one in inner Earth, Tara, Gaia. The cumulative 12 faces are called the Guardians of the 12 Pillars. Four of the 12 primary rainbow ray sound pillars of the planetary Christos realignment mission anchor into Earth via the four heads of Earth's FFM ALPIN, Four Faces of Man ALPIN. The Easter Island heads, rock sculptures, were created by ancient Mua, Indigo human Magi race descendants in recognition of the founders' continued commitment to fulfillment of the Christos realignment mission. So the Four Faces of Man, top right now, ALPIN is an activated Lumerian pin system that links the vertical Axis A tonal lines of the Earth, Tara, Gaia planetary shields to the Axis B tonal lines of the parallel Earth, Tara, Gaia shields, and the Axis C tonal lines of inner Earth, Tara, Gaia shields. When activated, the Four Faces of Man ALPIN allows the Earth, Tara, Gaia system to be drawn into merger with the D12 Universal Divine Blueprint and the Trine field in our time matrix. The Trine field is the D13 core of the antimatter Ki-Ra-Shah primal light fields. Merger with the Ki-Ra-Shah Trine field will allow the Earth, Tara, Gaia system to phase lock via primal Kundalini sound pillar anchoring rods to the Magi field transharmonic time vector of a neighboring stable time matrix to permanently restore the D12 divine blueprint and prevent Earth and this time matrix from being drawn into the phantom matrix in completion of the Emerald Covenant Christos realignment mission. So bottom right, it says, on behalf of the Elohi Elohim Emerald Covenant founders, the GA Ayani Indigos of Inner Earth, Sirius B Maharaji and Azarite Universal Templar Security Team created the Four Faces Man Guardian of the 12 Pillars ALPIN between 22,500 and 22,326 BC in preparation for the Christos realignment mission originally scheduled the 22326 BC stellar activation cycle. Anunnaki intruders raided Earth as the sack began, preventing activation of the Four Faces of Man. The founders rescheduled the Christos realignment mission to December 21st, 2012, the climax of the next due stellar activation cycle. The Four Faces of Man began activation in October 2001 and will complete the 12-stage activation cycle in August 2003, bringing the Great White Lion and Golden Eagle APINs to life, preparing the Earth, Tara, Gaia system for merger with the Trian-Marji field to complete the Christos realignment mission in 2012. Like I said before, as the Invisible War drama updated as the years went on, there was more intervention necessary because there was more of a deeper level of these energies that came to the forefront with, again, the Fatali. And so there was a deeper activation of the Christic councils that came on the scene with those energies, okay, in order to run the fail-safe, which is like an override because things got that bad that it triggered like an immune response within the external creation holographic arenas in order for divine will to start now working in through, this reality and other realities where there has been compromisations, mathematically speaking, in order to help provide that host out for those who want to align with, the organic ascension and the severing of those who still want a war. So they'll just end up drifting away within whatever they have left with what they can drag down into alignment of their imploding finite life black hole subtime distortion matrix until they finally run out of quantum and return to space dust basically and implode in on itself as the everything and just parasite off each other until there's nothing left basically. So it's clear to see that America has certainly been a hotbed of activity for the fallen angelic ET races, with the Four Corners area where Colorado and Denver is located being one of the most prominent and favoured locations for the Illuminati. And as we have already surmised, most of the human level Illuminati members are not aware of the real war of the grids of Earth in the Templar quest. Denial is still a huge tactic of the presence of these forces, despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary. The programming over so many lifetimes has conditioned the human mind to seek comfort in the lie, protect their administrators, and scoff at anything labelled a conspiracy, switching off any further discussion or investigation into the topic, akin to the Semmelweis reflex. I think we do live in a post-disclosure world, but most of the masses are living in denial of accepting the truth, which creates a stubborn resistance born out of the ego mind, as we have covered. This condition allows the fallen races to mock the ignorant human race by hiding it all in plain sight, as we have seen when analysing Denver Airport, which is undoubtedly a screaming beacon of covert alien presence. So I had a good idea to what I may have been heading into. However, obviously when I went out to Denver for this twin flame union, at the same time I was excited to see what this connection might unravel. The Stargates and these APIN sites are all important for those indigos and humans assisting, whether they are aware of it or not, in helping to anchor the necessary energies into the grids that might help explain why you may have been urged to travel to certain locations for holidays or even relocated to at times in your life. As with me looking back on my life after coming into this knowledge of the Stargate and APIN locations, it was clear that I was being moved to help assist in the grid works, that my presence here was helping to anchor. Making the move over from Australia to England when I was 9 in 1999 was no accident, right before the 2000-2017 stellar activation cycle commenced. And as we will see later, my time in Denver, Colorado was necessary to also assist in sending and receiving codes to and from the grids, which had connections to England and Australia that I later got led out to in 2023, 2024. So I left for Denver from gate 33 at 33 years old. Okay, I remember even that few months prior I had that dream, remember, with the slashes of the 3 and 3 with Hathor coming in, so it was all connected, right? It was so strange. So left Denver from gate 33 at 33 years old, evading the UIR genocide programs of the mRNA vaccine transhumanist rollout. I remember there being a vicar sat a few rows down and at the other side of the plane in his full black cassock and white collar, who appeared to be very uncomfortable and distressed. Those collars are symbolic of strangling the throat chakra, where they are preaching the twisted gospel fallen Anu Elohim edited scripture, or they're part of the Catholic slants, obviously the fallen Amicron, Draconian, Seraphim races. I found it quite funny because it felt like we were descending into the Devil's Pit as we approached Denver, where I saw on the map such places named as Devil's Tower, Devil's Lake, etc. That his expression matched perfectly the kind of reaction you would expect by a vicar of Christ being dropped behind enemy lines, or rather being on a plane with the Finborn Christic warrior going through his process of being activated and wising up to all the shenanigans of the church. Everything seemed fine on the first night, but it was on the second or third night that I started to see a split personality come through this individual. Okay, she was also a Gemini, which already was a bit of a red flag for me with my experiences with Geminis and reading that sign is probably the closest you get to what Satan would fall under if he had a sign. Not saying all Geminis are like this, and I have met lovely Geminis, but I felt there was more of a susceptibility to this duplicitous nature that people under this sign can fall victim to. It is mutable air, governed by Mercury, which makes them very mercurial, but flippant, and difficult for them to see things through in their endeavours, can make them fall into the Luciferian light trap of the false intellectual spheres with their beliefs and philosophical viewpoints. Okay, in other words, Mercury is in the Egyptian myths linked to Thoth. Okay, in the Norse myths is Loki. It's the trickster. Okay, so there's, again, like I said, when you look at it through the lens of astrotheological interpretations of these astrological spheres, and you read about the kind of ET meta-terrestrial stories of like the Thoth, Enki, Zephylium, Anunnaki, and how they're tied into the Luciferian covenant, and how Thoth has been a real big problem for Earth. Okay, when he defected against the Emerald Covenant, he caused massive problems, which triggered this Luciferian conquest during the whole, stellar activation cycle last time around with Atlantis, and what happened after that with the fall of Atlantis and the Babylon massacre, etc. That he was, pretty much front and center at turning the tides towards us experiencing what we've experienced with this hardship and, delaying of this Christos realignment mission. So yeah, very interesting. That's why I said so important to just look through all these stories at multiple levels with these lenses, no more so than the astrological, astrobiological, and the literal interdimensional kind of ET system, with plugging it into the cosmogony of the Stargate Templar system. So Gemini, I referred to her in the book as Gemini. Okay, she attended an Imperial Combat Art School, which was quite intense training, with only a few schools located in America that carried on the tradition of this elite level training for the Imperial Guard in China. She had spent many years in training, getting to a Sifu level, which was admirable, as it also required a year of toughening, where she spent time hardening the body and microfracturing her bones in order to turn the whole body into a weapon. They would teach you how to kill people with your bare hands, along with the use of weapons, where she had many lying around her personal spaces. I later found out it wasn't uncommon to sleep with axes down by the side of the bed and gun under her pillow. I mean, this is America, but it definitely screamed insecurities to me that was based on unhealed trauma, or, the actual entities that were kind of guiding her with where she incarnated from and what she was connected into. The school itself, upon investigating it, was draped in black and red as its colours, and it had the 64-bit Anunnaki checkerboard matrix I Ching octagon and yin yang symbols that goes right into the fallen angelic geometries, as you can see there in the slide with the images, right? And you also got the octagon with the UFC, with the big monster logo, which is basically Hebrew for 666. Blood sacrifice rituals, right? These entities love spilling blood. That's why they love wars. That's why they love this kind of combat sports and venerating these tools of warfare, okay, that sheds blood. There was an air of arrogance and entitlement due to her status within the school that she carried with her, which matched the attitudes of the races that founded it. My respect for her accomplishments soon diminished when I observed the way she would come across in light of it. However, there was one side of her that was this beautiful, gentle, and quiet angelic being who offered me glimpses beyond this toxic masculine shell she had fabricated based on unhealed trauma that kept me interested. Either that, or it was basically she was a narcissist, right? A covert narcissist. I've dealt with narcissists in the past, but this was the trickiest one because it was in female form, and she was using the art of seduction. But it was definitely a narcissistic tactic. So whether it was a genuine angelic version of herself or that charade or facade that she put up in order to kind of keep me interested and lure me out there in the first place. Nonetheless, these subtle things I was picking up on were done so in quiet, observant fashion, and I made the most of my time out there. I'm very grateful for the hospitality and time spent to show me around and get to know the lands and beautiful Rocky Mountains, which were breathtaking. I had an interesting dinner with the housemate and boss she was working for, who bought my course and sent me the email at 1111 that set this whole union up, right? And she was warning me to be careful based on previous experiences that she had with so-called twinning when her heart was opened. Okay, well, it turned out, obviously, hindsight, after I went through what I went through, that warning did have credibility, as I later discovered. It was kind of like almost a soft disclosure with what I went through, which is quite interesting. As we'll go through, it will reveal itself. But otherwise, yeah, another important lesson for me to learn the tactics of evil and infiltration, that you're going to be so careful when you wake up or start your process of waking up, right? I remember we had a few synchronicities with Jesus Christ during our time together, where she had an affinity with Mary Magdalene, and I was sharing my stories about all the characters I'd seen, things I've experienced, and the only one evading me thus far was Jesus Christ, with me half jokingly speculating that I may be one of the incarnates of the Sananda Soul Group, or Avatar Collective, which is linked to Jesus, Joshua 12, given also my connection with apparently being sent by the Galactic Federation, as I found out that time of visiting the shaman, which tied into Iyasha explaining how Jesus with his Soul Collective or working with the Galactic Federation to try and get his twin flame Mary back, who was married off to Jeshua 9 during the Three Christ drama, meaning Mary had her codes reversed by the fallen Anu Elohim oversoul Jeshua 9, creating a big problem and a need to fix. Otherwise, Mary was on the full path and Jeshua 12 would be stuck this side of the matrix, unable to ascend out of this time matrix when the time came. This scenario, it felt, was playing out now for me with this whole union, but I was careful not to slip into belief again and kept it as pure speculation and a maybe until such time I had verifiable proof, as in being able to recall memory of pre-incarnation here in what was really going on. Having dealt with troubled individuals as friends in the past who shared similar traits to the fallen races, i.e. with narcissistic tendencies, I probably had more compassion and patience than most, with an approach of me maybe trying to help as best I can, which goes into the whole bleeding heart syndrome of the guardian races thinking I can fix it. But I, myself, was not fully integrated and still battling from the remnants of the infiltration and attacks I had on myself, so I was in a weakened state when all of this sprung up, and somewhat naive to say the least, clutching onto this union as maybe a way for me to escape the hardships I'd been facing ever since 2020. To put it bluntly, I was vulnerable, but fortunate enough to have developed the resilience and awareness over the years to guide me through this period. We had an interesting encounter when cruising through the Rockies, where two ravens swooped down in front of the car, following the road just ahead of us for 10 seconds or so, where they disappeared just before we came into a sighting of wild moose. We pulled over to admire them grazing when all of a sudden the music stopped playing for a few minutes, then restarted on a reggae song singing about Jesus Christ. I also recall having a dream experience whilst out there, where I was in an environment of heavy poltergeist activity that was messing with the lights of houses and street lamps to try and incite fear in me as I walked down this road. I then encountered these beings who were black magicians who were trying to do something to me. I can't quite remember, but I do remember it culminating into one of them deliberating to me that I should respect the devil, urging me to bend a knee, which I laughed and resisted, where he then pulled out a knife and slashed me in the gut, which made me fall to my knees and curl over in order to force me to respect the devil. Then I woke up. But yeah, it was a bit weird dream experience when I was out there. Upon returning to the UK, quite a few interesting events took place. Okay, so I spent 2 weeks out in Denver, and just to kind of fit into the union, and I was picking up on that. Okay, there's like two sides to her. Definitely, the side that I saw when speaking with her to get me out there suddenly flipped, and I saw this other side to her, like a Jekyll and Hyde entity, which obviously goes into this duplicitous nature of the narcissistic tendencies of these fallen angelic races, and certainly the entity that was working through her and what she was connected into. So I came back after the 2 weeks, right, and a few interesting events took place. The first noticeable difference was the energy of the house. Okay, it seemed more bad energies had crept in to the home since my departure that was very difficult to deal with. It was a very demonic, like gut-churning energy that would amplify during the night, with noticeably more frequent snaps of energy directed at me to snap me out of slipping into the dream space and getting decent sleep. We were still communicating, and she agreed to come out and visit me for 2 weeks to return the favour and show her around England and again explore more of this connection. This discordant energy in the home led to this heavy brain fog that made it difficult to function, akin to the 2 months I had when hell showed up at my doorstep in 2020, but this time it felt more related to my fungal/nanobot infection I was carrying that they were turning the screw on. I was led to buy these sausages right at the grocer's, which I consumed, that were borderline going off, that triggered a 2-day fungus flare-up. One of those nights I had a dream experience of coming back around from being knocked out, where I woke up inside a cave covered in cobwebs with mushrooms starting to grow on my clothes. I then started to slowly get up and brush the dust, fungus and cobwebs off me whilst coughing and looking around me to see other decomposing corpses ranging from quite fresh to decaying to outright skeletons, where mushrooms were sprouting and growing from these bodies that the fungus had taken over. The stench in the cave was hideous, along with the spores being released from the mushrooms themselves that made me cover my mouth and nose. It was a demonic mushroom cave that I managed to navigate myself out of, where upon reaching the cave entrance, Crowley Jr. was there with a conniving smirk on his face, shocked that I had escaped. He even commented, "How did you get out of that one?" as I reached the fresh air, and then I woke up. Yeah, I'll never forget that. There was so much infiltration going on during that time that he popped up again off the back of my fungus being, flared up again as a result of me buying these and eating these sausages, right, that were kind of almost off. That I found myself in the astrals in that precarious position, but I came back round and there he was at the foot of the cave, the entrance of the cave, kind of shocked, as if like suggesting he was kind of orchestrating and was the architect of this whole setup that he tried to trap me in. Again, help wipe me off and get me off the grids. And that was just the common theme ever since 2020 with, all these hunts and infiltration attempts. I then have another dream experience, but this time I was back in Denver at one of the properties we had stayed at, where I was in the room with Gemini, okay, where she was overseeing an attack on me by a poltergeist type entity that was very violent. I had this white shirt on, and remember, I was being cut beneath the shirt that bled a message that was being written that said something along the lines of, everything you say is recorded and will be used against you. We never forget. I felt a presence outside the building. Then all of a sudden there was this vacuum type force that ripped the windows out on one end of the property where I was, which was trying to take me. I latched onto the inside of a door frame where I was literally horizontal from the force of this vacuum, trying to stop myself being ripped into its current and outside. I could see Gemini pacing up and down, looking indifferent toward the other end of the house, whilst her dog got ripped into this funnel and outside, nearly hitting me on the way out. The vacuum stopped when my consciousness then moved outside the building to see that a giant octopus type entity had been caught by an interdimensional high-tech wearing SWAT team that had this octopus in some kind of frequency fence that was the source of what I had experienced. I then witnessed a betrayal amongst one of the team members happen in regards to where this octopus entity was meant to be taken, which one guy had other plans and took it for whatever purpose that was. Why that was significant, I have no idea, but I then woke up. What's interesting is that days after this experience, I watched a movie by Marvel called Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, where a cephalopod creature was sent to kidnap American Chavez in order to acquire multiversal abilities in the opening scene that looked uncannily similar to the entity I just encountered in that dream experience. Okay, you can see there at the top left of the slide, that's otherwise similar to the entity I experienced, this octopus, with again, Gemini kind of overseeing this kind of like demise or this plan to try and take me out in the astrals. Likewise with Crowley Jr., he was there when I woke up in this demonic, fungus cave, mushroom fungus cave, and he was there as if like he was again trying to orchestrate and architect and oversee my demise and infiltration and traps in order to try and just get rid of me basically. So the thunderbolt from the gods. So the infiltration attempts had stepped up, and there were a few attempts at trying to wipe me out again by the Luciferian forces that I was seemingly dealing with at this point. The energies were still heavy in the house, and they hit a crescendo on the eve of the Queen's Jubilee weekend on that Friday night of June 3rd, 2022, where I recall trying to go to sleep, but there was this horrible demonic frequency that I was picking up on that made my guts churn, and got to a point where I felt like my soul and astral body was being slowly pulled from my body in an attempt to body snatch, where I remember just crying, asking for help in my time of need. Luckily, my prayers did get answered as there was intervention, this time by the praying mantis, no pun intended, Athean being that I saw that time in an astral experience at the front of the house when seeing the rare earth crystal gem cave beneath the big Lebanese cedar tree, where he looked down on me beyond the dome like I was in some kind of petri dish. Okay, so there you can see the images of the tree, right? It's at the front of the tree, like beneath that tree, because it's on like a slope. When you go down onto the road, there's a mound that kind of leads up to where the tree is at the ground level, which is kind of like up to maybe my shoulder height. It's like maybe almost 2 meters tall from that level. So when you go in, it's almost like from that perspective, from the road, there's in the astrals there was like a huge opening which you can walk in under the tree. That was like this rare earth crystal gem cave that was connected into. So my consciousness / astral body was transported to a huge crystal Keenan dome, where I was placed on this stone slab in the center of this giant circular domed room, where the praying mantis entity started to do some energy work, which I had faint recollections of before I then came back into body, along with an 80% reprieve in the ill energies. I then managed to get off to sleep, where I woke up the next day to find my sister and her boyfriend had suffered a rough night as well, explaining how the guts were churning too, which is probably residual to the kind of energies I was dealing with. It felt like the 2 weeks of ill energies and this infiltration in the house had subsided somewhat and back to normal, with normal still being, somewhat battleground at this house, just not anywhere near as ramped up as they had been during those 2 weeks upon me returning from Denver. This intervention extended into Saturday night, where the Queen's Jubilee celebrations were in full swing. I remember it being quite a stormy, static Saturday, with the afternoon conjuring up some storms that were due to hit us in the evening. Around 10 p.m, lightning struck the Lebanese cedar tree at the front of the house, which was like a bomb going off that immediately cut off the electricity and turned all the lights off in the house, as you can imagine, and made the house rumble and shake for a good 10 long seconds. I was in my room in the attic and thought the lightning had struck the house in the roof somewhere. The car alarm in the drive was immediately set off, and all I could hear was my mum screaming downstairs in hysterics from the shock. I can see how shell shock can be a thing, along with PTSD, with those poor souls who are lured into the checkerboard matrix, pawned soul dyers, soldiers, soul dyers, in wartime on behalf of megalomaniac fallen angelic factions and their human minions' quest for dominion. I went downstairs and outside after I had calmed down, as I had a good spike in my adrenaline, which made me swear for a good minute before I shifted into excited curiosity and amazement of the forces of nature and wanting to investigate. I was already speculating whether it was ET technology that was used to decommission the tree, which was probably a portal site that got infiltrated and taken over due to me leaving for Denver and being off the grids there, hence why the energies were so bad upon my return. I went outside and knew immediately the tree had been struck, as splinters of wood were scattered everywhere. The tree itself was killed, as the lightning travelled right down and into the roots, effectively splitting the tree. It was raining still and dark, and obviously a lot of neighbours had surfaced to assess the damage. Some people's home had roofs and front porches damaged from the projectiles of wood that would have dispersed like a frag grenade when the lightning struck the tree. Luckily no one was injured, and because of the Jubilee weekend, cones were placed out on the road to deter parking so they could have their little street party to celebrate their slavery under Queen Lizard Breath, which meant that at least 2 cars avoided being completely crushed by parts of the tree that fell there. So yeah, there you can see some images. There's the tree before and after. It was pretty savage. I've got more photos as well. So there's from the front kind of angle from the road, and you can see it just so many limbs splintered off, and a few projectiles. I mean, this one on the left was like 5 houses down that got sent right through the front porch. I mean, luckily no one was putting their shoes on or anything at the time. And then obviously opposite the road, so yeah, there's a bit of damage, a bit of collateral damage, but yeah, luckily no one got hurt. So of course I had to also jump online and see what the symbology of lightning striking a tree was as well. Lightning striking a tree can have multiple symbolic meanings, including good luck. Some believe that the wood from a lightning struck tree brings good luck. Others believe that the power from the lightning can be passed on to the person who owns the wood. Sudden illumination. Lightning is a traditional symbol of sudden illumination. Destruction of ignorance. Lightning is a traditional symbol of the destruction of ignorance. Punishment. Lightning is a traditional symbol of punishment by the gods, most commonly attributed to Zeus. The following taken from Hidden Significance website by Stephen Jones. He writes, Divine Intervention. Many view a lightning-struck tree as a sign of divine intervention or communication. It's seen as a moment when the spiritual realm directly interacts with the physical world, leaving a visible mark. This can be interpreted as a message or warning from higher powers, a call to attention for those who witness it, or a sign of impending significant change or events. Spiritual awakening. The sudden, intense energy of lightning striking a tree is often associated with spiritual awakening or enlightenment. This interpretation suggests a rapid expansion of consciousness, sudden insights or realizations, and the shocking nature of spiritual truth breaking through our everyday awareness. And we have transformation and rebirth. The destructive yet transformative nature of lightning striking a tree symbolizes profound change and rebirth. It represents the old self being struck down to make way for new growth. Rapid personal transformation or life changes, and the pain and challenge of growth leading to renewal. Then we have the balance of opposing forces. The meeting of sky, lightning, and the earth in the form of the tree represents the balance and integration of opposing forces. This includes the merging of masculine, sky lightning, and feminine, earth tree, energies, the connection between spiritual and physical realms, and the integration of conscious and unconscious aspects of self. Given the context of my experiences and the parting gift of the Amanita muscaria mushroom that sprouted in the autumn of 2021, along with the house being sold in 2022, by that point the deal was finalised, with my mother and I moving out. It seemed to coincide with this closing of a chapter and guarding contract to look after the grids there, perhaps somewhat reluctantly, given the immense infiltration and things I'd experienced there ever since 2020, that led to the decision to decommission that site, as it were, in the grand drama of the invisible war that was unfolding. I do believe that tree did house a portal site on a higher dimension that probably sadly got taken over by intrusive forces. Regardless, it was a nice tree and it was sad to see it go, but a necessary event, I guess, which helped to springboard a lot of changes that were to come. Okay, so there you can see on the right hand side the image after the tree was felled, taken away on a nice beautiful sunny day. So Gemini came out to England, where we stayed for the first week in London, then went up to the Lake District and back to Cuthberga before she flew back to Denver. This is when I started noticing more of the cat and mouse manipulation tactics go on with her, with a few instances that did make for unnecessarily difficult situations. But we had some interesting experiences on our travels in the UK, one of which was in Glastonbury, where we stayed for a few nights to check out the tour and the town. We stayed in an Airbnb just outside of Glastonbury in an annex adjoined to a farmhouse. There were a few very weird experiences with the owner of that place and a black cat that came in one night and sat on my lap and purred for quite a long time. We would both sense the owner was a bit weird, and we had these glass doors that at night reflected the inside of the building. But we kind of joked that the owner was probably outside watching us and we wouldn't know. As we joked about that, looking at the standing windows, the owner just creepily appeared and knocked on the window to ask us about something that spooked me somewhat, all about the timing. You know, when you get that sense that you are being watched, well, that phenomenon has been proven in science, given the great research that was shared in David Wilcock's book, The Sourcefield Investigations, as well as with Russell Targ's research with the ESP at Stanford University with remote viewing. So we both definitely picked up on that sense of him watching us. Okay, we closed the curtains after that, obviously. I had another interesting experience in Glastonbury with energy when going inside the Courtyard bookstore in town. That's where you can see the image. Okay, so that bookstore housed a lot of very weird books, and that's otherwise their logos and symbols on their website. We had arrived the previous night and strolled through the town, where I did notice the kind of books being displayed in that bookstore as being very esoteric, but on the side of the demonic, with a lot of black magic and satanic books. So I thought I'd go in store and see what else they have on their shelves out of curiosity. As soon as I stepped into the store, it was like stepping into a steam room, but energetically speaking, with this palpable demonic, prickly skin type of frequency I had experienced at times at Cuthberga during my attacks was all over my body and in my auras. Gemini also felt the same, as I described to her what I was feeling, and she immediately turned away and waited outside. I wandered about for a while, just looking at the other titles of books in there, and it was majority black magic, demonology, etc. And I just remember observing the people in there and the shop owner having a chat as if everything was fine and that they had no sense of the kind of energy this place harbored. It was an astonishing experience, but otherwise confirmed some of the black magic and demonic activity I'd been exposed to when recognizing the kind of frequency that place housed as a result of all the geometries, text, and energy those books possessed. During our stay, we also headed out to check the tour, where we also witnessed the sudden appearance of lots of planes, chemtrailing that was quite timely on an otherwise relatively clear summer's day. Yeah, this is another thing. Books can also be portals for entities to come through and affect the environment in which you have these books and your consciousness, as well as your dream experiences too. Okay, I know a lot of people have testified that when they get hold of some like pretty dark books, then they're opening themselves up to transverse and experience and interact with some of these entities and be dragged into some of their reality fields, okay, with their domains within the black hole for phantom matrices, I assume, right? And that kind of energy then being able to leak into your home, your house. When you take that book into your house, you're almost inviting that energy and entities that are connected into that into your fields. Okay, so very important that if you consciously work, you can switch them off. Okay, like all these symbols, they only have power if you give it power over them, but it's often best, prevention is better than cure, right, to just kind of avoid it. But if you are wanting to learn more about the forces of evil with these kind of books and see what these guys are practicing and venerating, then just make sure you're protecting yourself by running, the techniques, the visuals, and yeah, kind of sealing things before you dive into it, so you're not, again, unwittingly giving your consent to have your energy drained from these entities, or be drawn into some of these experiences which might be quite nightmarish and challenging for you in the waking and dreaming state. Our time in Glastonbury ended where we headed up to the Lake District, and there was only one interesting experience to note. It was a vision one morning whilst awake but resting, where I saw all of these giant golden unks hovering above the lakes in the area and starting to spin very quickly, where they were being activated and dishing out all kinds of rainbow-like colours, okay, which again was quite interesting. So we left the lakes on the 20th of June, okay, summer solstice eve, and this is in 2022, and headed for the Vale of Pusey, okay, which is Milk Hill in Wiltshire, which was the site for Stargate11, according to the MCO AMCC teachings. We stopped over in some pub in Wales to grab a drink on the way down to Milk Hill. As I walked into the pub, again, there was a song playing about Jesus Christ that I found quite interesting, because as we left and crossed the Severn Bridge, we saw a sign in the form of a piece of fabric with Christ is King written on it, or something along those lines. I can't recall exactly from memory. As we approached the Stargate site, we had these two beautiful woodland pigeons fly in front of us for a good minute or so before departing, which added to the sense of being welcome to the site. We arrived in the late afternoon, parked up and headed over to the hill. We noticed initially a crop circle in the distance on one of the fields. We weren't sure we were at the right location initially, so we ventured further over in line with this great chalk/limestone artwork on the side of the hill that had this white horse carved in it. We knew we were at the right location then, as all of a sudden a drone was dispatched as if from nowhere and came near us to observe us, accompanied with a weird guy in his pickup truck who drove past us and parked a fair distance but still in the line of sight of us for a good 10 or 15 minutes before we decided to head around the mound and out of sight. Minutes later we could hear the pickup truck pull up as we were sat on these stones that were there, and he literally crept up around one of the side of the mounds, so we came into view where he would have been no more than 10 meters away. It was a weird exchange. The guy had no expression. It was probably a synthetic/clone or possessed to be the eyes and ears for entities to keep an eye on the site. We both stood up and was expressing our discomfort and for him to back up, which he then did, and headed back out from where he came in as we watched him. That to me confirmed this site is of importance. Other than that, there was no other obvious signs that this is a Stargate location apart from the crop circle, which is used to help imbue codes into the gate and grid networks it connects to. To paraphrase what Iyasha writes in Voyages 1, Sleeping Abductees, crop circles or crop formations are evidence of alien visitor presence in the area. This can be helpful or harmful depending on the agendas of the races who have cast the symbol into the grids to form the crop formations. These formations are done through direct subatomic energy imprints cast into the electromagnetic imprints of organic elements for intended multidimensional manipulations. One of the main purposes is for use as neurological stimulation, where Iyasha writes, open quote, some crop formations serve the purpose of stimulating or accelerating the subtle neurological structures of the local inhabitants, while others serve to repress, scramble, or desensitize those subtle biological processes. Crop formations are one application of the multidimensional language of Quilonta. It is the language spoken by the core of your biologies and by the very nature of your elemental world itself. Crop formations have multiple purposes. The primary purpose is to house frequency or to ground into the location certain frequency bands intended to affect the populace in very specific ways. They are composed of frequency patterns, and they directly affect the frequency patterns of all biological life forms within their intended range of influence. This range can span a radius well over several thousand miles from its point of origin. The formations are often placed in sequential fashion, sometimes thousands of miles apart, but each serving as part of a greater frequency pattern that is nearly impossible to detect from ground level human perception. Crop formations are your first visible physical evidence of ET presence presently available to you on a mass level. They are subliminal programming devices being used to manipulate, direct, or guide you through the intimate, unknown structure of your subconscious minds and biochemical and electrical systems. They are one type of what we know as mass frequency control devices. You are dealing here with technologies light years beyond the scope of your present human abilities. Many of the crop formations have been placed so as to assist you by counteracting the effects of other placements that are intended to do you harm. Presently, there are more helpful crop formations in place than are their harmful counterparts. More will appear as you progress into the next century. It is important for you to understand that whether the formations are harmful or helpful, they are directly influencing you in complex ways on subliminal levels. You must learn to use them, or they will instead serve as the vessels through which you are used. Attempting to destroy the visible evidence of such a formation will in no way disarm its attributes. Once it is in place, the frequency it harnessed has been indelibly coded into the land, air, and biological forms of the region. It is for this reason that the helpful ETs, who become aware of how the formations were being used to harm you, found it necessary to counter the offending codes rather than to simply disengage them from operational focus. There is much you need to learn about such advanced technologies, and those such as ourselves are quite willing to share our knowledge with you so that you may learn the skills required to protect yourself from those who wish to do and are presently doing harm to large percentages of your populations. End quote. So there you can see images taken from where we were at the Mill Hill Mound of the crop circle. Okay, that you can see in the distance. That no doubt was again, coding into the area in that region, linked into the Stargate's particular programs. Okay, and there's the map of Walker's Hill, Mill Hill, where it parked up, which from that point is about 10-15 minute walk to the actual site. And so there's the site circled in red. Again, over to the left was where the crop circle was. You can see the white horse is otherwise on the mound. Like if you walk directly up to the top, there's kind of like a mini ring site, and there's a few stones around, and that's basically exactly where Milk Hill, at the top of Milk Hill, is, where supposedly this universal Stargate11, interdimensionally speaking, is located within Earth's interdimensional anatomy. Again, as soon as we walked over to that point, that's when the drone came up, and that's when we had this guy in the pickup truck swing by as if out of nowhere to keep eyes on us and see what who are these people, what's going on. Yeah, so it was very interesting. So we headed to Salisbury afterward for some dinner, then drove to Knowlton Church. Okay, the place, if you recollect, where I shared my experience with Crowley Jr. at the summer solstice eve in 2018, where I was doing the disbanding of Saturn's ring ritual. We arrived at the T-junction, no more than 700 meters up the road from the site, okay, where Gemini insisted she needed to stop for a wee. As we stopped, I remember gazing up at the stars through the sunroof where I saw a shooting star. I then got this message and sense that we need to leave now. I then saw a car approaching in the distance with their headlights on full beam, lighting up the mist that enveloped much of the area. I insisted she hurry, where I then floored it toward Knowlton Church, where we dipped into a very thick mist as the road descended on our approach. Right when I turned into the road where Knowlton Church is, we had these two helicopters all of a sudden fly right over us, and the site at extremely low altitude with no lights on, which created this huge noise and reverberation in the car. I looked in the rear view mirror to see whether the car I thought I saw had passed, but I could not see it. Maybe I was distracted by these two helicopters that were flying in around the same time the car passed, or the lights I had seen were in fact these helicopters that passed right over us. Regardless, it was a weird and timely event. I actually got the message that there was a plan to create a car crash, and those two helicopters were in fact soul drones talked about in the super soldier community, which are linked to the Greys used to capture souls when they die. It could have just been military training, but my intuition suggests it was linked to alien MyLab activity, given the timing of it all, especially given the codes that we may have carried and imbued into the grids along England from the lakes all the way down into Milk Hill, Stargate11, and now into the magic ritual site of Knowlton Church. That could have been something they may have wanted to prevent. Regardless, this happened bang on midnight when we turned in. So yeah, I remember seeing the time, it was bang on midnight, 0000. As soon as I turned in and saw that, I just heard this massive and it just flew right over us. These two helicopters, so low, just reverberating, feeling the vibrations. So it was all of a sudden. So it was a pretty surreal experience. That, like I said, it was probably linked into some manipulations that were going to happen that I kind of got the message of that I need to get there quick. So otherwise they're going to kind of set up maybe, I don't know, a collision with a car or something, who knows. But otherwise, yeah, very interesting experience. Before Gemini left, I recall another weird event happened at Cuthbergen when she was on the phone to a friend and colleague from back home, wherein I got a huge frequency slap on the left side of my face and head area, accompanied with a huge high frequency pitch ringing in my ear. This otherwise instigated me probing into this connection of hers with him that revealed some rather odd behavior by him toward her and their history that prompted that night a dream experience where I could see Gemini and him arguing on the opposite side of a river, where there was also a swan and snapping turtle posturing at each other, reflecting the two of them going at it. I jumped into the river and swam over to help and grabbed him and pulled him in the water as Gemini pushed him. He then tried to drown me, but Gemini assisted and I escaped and woke up. What's funny is the guy had turtle features, which may have been symbolic of the animal spirit that possessed him, with the swan representing Gemini in our union, which was prevalent during the whole initial unraveling for me in the hologram, along with the numbered sequences of 222s and 222s, which seemed to be the coding for that year, given 2022 and the number 2 being linked with union and the heart, because if you mirror the two vertically, it is shaped like a heart. We had another interesting event take place which led us to some money that was hidden and long forgotten about. Gemini had lost a pendant down the drain that strangely flung off her necklace as she was changing and was caught in the sink in the ensuite of what used to be my parents' bedroom. She came downstairs all flustered and worried, as that was a family heirloom and quite precious that she thought she may have lost. I said it might be okay as it should be caught in the trap under the sink that I can get to. Well, when I went upstairs and started to pull the pedestal to get to the pipes connecting the sink, I noticed a small pouch taped to the inside of the pedestal that had stashed in it £500. It had a little note that looked like one of my parents' handwriting, but must have been stashed there for years and forgotten about. I recovered the ring and otherwise knew that happened for a reason to lead me to the money stashed behind the sink, which was used together on meals out, etc. I later asked my mother whether she had any money stashed in the house anywhere, and told her what she found, and I'd completely forgotten what that may have been for and why that was done. Okay, so yeah, very interesting that what kind of led through her losing her necklace led indirectly me to see the money stashed behind the sink, which again was quite synchronistic and very fortunate, right? It's a fortunate event that again, these kind of mini events kept happening, but it was like good mixed with the bad. That's why it's very split down the middle, 50-50, very duplicitous, which is why, it kind of kept me in this relationship for probably longer than I should have, given obviously again what continued to outpicture as we'll get to along the timeline. So upon Gemini returning and Cuthbert going through the final agreements of the house sale, I was naturally looking for some place to live. I'd stayed at the house to help with prepping the house for the sale and to also help with the move when it came. But interestingly, things did drag themselves out unnecessarily that hinted at intervention to keep me at the property for longer. I'd agreed with Gemini to rent a place in Denver together and for me to move out on my B1, B2 visas I acquired when working on the super yachts. I was paying rent in 2 places and decided to head out there initially, knowing I will need to come back to help with the final move of the house when I got the call. My second trip out there was a little more relaxed as we had our own place, but I was still encountering some interference and weird events, one of which was people above me making loud noises at random times, especially during the night and early morning. They were often accompanied with hits of frequency to snap me out of trying to drift off to sleep. I recall having a dream of Gemini and her dog, where she was in the room again, aloof and very distant, where a dog looked at me and spoke in English and said, "You two are divine, your union is divine." Then I woke up. I've never had a dog speak to me before, so there's a first. Maybe our union was divine, but it increasingly appeared that Gemini had some issues and major entity attachments as she increasingly slipped back into minimal effort regarding the basics of relationships and upkeep of a home, focused more of her attention on just appearance and the combat score, again, giving off this sense of entitlement. I would observe her when out in public, having beady eyes on the environment around her that tended toward checking out other guys in front of me, sometimes more obvious than others, which got on my nerves and acted to try and degrade and / deflate me. The combat score was also another weapon used to try and create this superiority complex that started to become obnoxious. That was also designed to knock my self-confidence. This is kind of all the things I was picking up on, right? I later found out she had history with a lot of guys that passed through the school, which offered a good supply of male attention for the entity working through her that acted to deliver another cording between me, her, and the school, which is again very discordant. Before heading out this second time, I remember helping her in securing the place, this rental place. Okay, then all of a sudden being super difficult she was to deal with over the phone as I was about to pack my things and head out there, creating unnecessary conflict again. It's just this kind of theme of losing focus, being very discordant, feeling very flippant. One moment's good, next minute it's like there's problems. It's as if now that she had what she wanted, a place to stay, the niceties diminished and another notch to the level of narcissism and manipulation came out. I started to really see that she did have 2 sides of her, and this other side, when it came through, often would just create chaos for no apparent reason other than to help infiltrate my life, where I did lose focus, had my energy and resources drained, and found myself slipping back to drinking mead, alcohol, and smoking tobacco with her now and again. I was enmeshed in what Eve Logan, calls the love bite, which is the title of her book with the subtitle Alien Interference in Human Love Relationships, often labelled as the dark side of Cupid. Otherwise referred to, what I had decoded earlier, the femme fatale, right? But me being me and knowing the much larger drama we're a part of and how these people who have been heavily manipulated are often victims to childhood trauma and MK Ultra programs where they are at the whims of the entity who is directing and controlling them, this can be healed, and I was somewhat thinking I can help with that, as I did have genuine love. I mean, it was love I'd never experienced before with my heart chakra being open that much. It was almost too much looking back to indicate that manipulations had been made, but I was focused more on the good, knowing the bad can be healed and hoping that would take place. There's that bleeding heart syndrome again, and the old saying Yasha refers to, where there's life, there's hope, which has been a saying which has definitely lost its value over the duration of this drama throughout history, given the continued abuse of guardian help by the aggressive races. It's kind of like I fell right into a Venus flytrap, but having the knowing it was one from very early on, but opting to see it through in order to kind of learn from the experience and see for myself where it leads me on my journey. I also had in the back of my mind this script playing out of the whole Joshua 12 Mary Magdalene, his twin, story with our union, thinking that she had fallen as a result of what was done to her, and that we did share a divine connection, but her codes had been heavily convoluted due to the infiltration of Joshua 9. These combinations kept me around far longer than most would have done. Regardless, this sense that she had an evil entity in spirit kind of working through her, or was her, that I was picking up on, was confirmed when on a FaceTime before heading out there. After securing the place, we were talking, and all of a sudden the image of her right side was starting to glitch. Then I noticed her pupil changed from a circle to a reptilian slit. Okay, there's the image on the top there. So her right eye changed to a reptilian slit. I screenshotted the image and otherwise theorized the camera capturing the entity that was working through her, that had come into her to see me and what she was up to, had merged its body with hers, sharing the same organ of sight, which overlaid the encryption of the reptilian entity's eye. I managed to capture with this interdimensional process that otherwise lays hidden out of sight and regular sensory perception. We had been manipulated / calibrated to. Either that, or she was an actual shape-shifting reptilian entity in the flesh, okay, which I kind of speculate that she could well have been, because there was a few other bleed throughs that I picked up on of a kind of reptilian form, as we'll get to. So I believe I captured and witnessed an entity come into the body in which it was in full control over, unfortunately, which often the individual who is being possessed has absolutely no idea of them being used as such, which makes it even more difficult when trying to reach resolutions from conflicts created by the entity, as that individual has no recollection of the things they say or do when the entity is in their body pulling the strings. And of course, there is the real possibility that she was an Ubi shapeshifting entity anyway, that's inserted there from the Black Hole 4 collectives. The Fatali Ubi White Dragon collective tend to hang out in either avatar or oversoul level identity, using their incarnate bodies down here and all body snatched bodies like pawns in their scheming and practices. The female feeds off of males, and the Fatali are known to target awakening indigos and Finborn, who are entities incarnating directly from the deity planes in order to assist in this drama, who carry the highest codes and energy running capacities that go into the plasma level of energy forms, which are claimed to be the highest form as taught by Iasha. The Fatali Ubi White Dragon Succubus female form and Incubus for the male form entities were Fims themselves before they fell in consciousness when trying to assist in this time matrix, and a part of the Borgia black hole matrix, which later connected into both Weesa's, the Weasley matrices, right, the Weesa deck and the Weesa black hole 4 matrices, and our phantom black hole system. So they are all linked via their wormhole networks. The Borgia is the biggest mass of a fallen matrix that also has false deity planes where the Fatali reside. The black hole sun there reverses the lowest level plasmas being emitted from the internal eternal deity planes and reorders it into a false violet ray associated with the black cube matrix of Saturn and the inverted violet rays of the seventh ray in the spectrum. They are the worst of the worst, as Yasha puts it, from the black hole pit, who surfaced to take over the United Intruder Resistance around 2012, when the drama escalated to the failsafe, with the Guardians, us, having deterred the apocalyptic timeline and scenario the fallen angelics wanted in order to rip our time matrix into their system to feed off of and help sustain their immortality. Of course, I did not know as much as I know now at the time, as I only came into information about the plasmas and the Finborns later in 2023 when all of this was said and done. However, I was very aware of succubus type entities, having dealt with a few in the dream state during 2021 and having read about them in folklore, where they are said to actually approach their victim first in the dream state and astrals before they make their move in the physical. Go figure, right? So they tie your astral body up in knots, manipulate and cord that, which makes it that much easier for them to then suck the life out of you in this plane. So yeah, go figure. That's exactly how we met, which could also explain why she was shocked. I had memory of the event that took place with the kiss in the astral and her trying to hook me in. Could be kind of symbolic of that kiss of death as well, right? Just thinking about it and how that's tied into Scorpio again, how that's linked into the backbiter and Judas giving Jesus the kiss of death is all symbolic, because some certain types of scorpions, right, when they sting you, actually leave a mark above and below the sting that almost looks like someone's kissed you with lipsticks. So it's like a upper lip and bottom lip. So quite interesting how that connects. I also recall, even before having the dream when we met a few months prior, I had an experience in the dream state with, I believe, Gemini in it, where I was conscious all of a sudden, sat around a large circular table on board some large ship in space, in some kind of large canteen, where there were these reptilians disguised as humans eating large chunks of meat from various animals. Some I feel were human, as one of the guys opposite me yelled at the girl I was sat next to send me to the kitchen to cook me up, as he wanted to have one of my thighs to eat. She grabbed my hand and led me up and away from the table, walking down the corridor together and out of sight. I was thinking, shit, I'm going to be eaten. I felt this connection to the girl, knowing that she loved me and actually did not want to see me die, but rather wanted to keep me, as I believed she was using me for sex, as we took a diversion and made love in a private bathroom just off one of the main corridors on board this ship. She was in human form, but she also had this encryption of being reptilian. I woke up whilst we were making love. Perhaps it may have been Gemini, and perhaps there was a coitus interest and wanted to keep me alive. Regardless, it was very odd and timely with the presence of this girl starting to appear in my dream space in the beginning of 2022, with the other time being with the lightsaber incident with Crowley Jr., if you recollect. It could possibly have been her as well. So it was very ambivalent, this connection, which is why it made it so difficult. And I guess that's the whole design and manipulation that can happen from these entities. Imagine capturing the opposite sex incarnation of your soul level identity, possessing it, then using it to try and take you down too. Very, very tricky to deal with. Such a scenario, given the mixed emotions, connections, and theories running around in my head. Whether we actually had a genuine connection or whether it was made to appear we had remains to be proven. Interestingly, when I shared the image of the snake eye with a friend, she spotted a photo of the woman who set this whole thing in motion to begin with in regards to purchasing my course, which also showed a slit in her eye too. Okay, and that's the individual you can see below on the slide, and the famous, movie series called Species that kind of, again, reveals the tactics and manipulations in nature through the art seduction of these succubi, ubi white dragon entities, these reptilian hybrid shapeshifting entities. I wasn't surprised, as I had this sense by then that this entity was obviously working through more than one individual, as this individual also showed some traits of succubus type behavior, with already having a partner 20 years her junior, which to me implied this need to feed associated with these entities working through such individuals. But I also had this sense of competing interest from the two of them over me in regards to being able to capture my energy and life force, but at the same time working together in this kind of mother-daughter type setup of working in pairs to achieve the entrapment. Again, these individuals may not even realize how they are being used as conduits to feed entity attachments, and because of all of our mutations we are running down here, we can all be susceptible to being tampered with and having our fields possessed by entities, some more than others, which is why it is so important to first be aware of this, and second, utilizing techniques that will help in strengthening our fields so we don't become so easily possessed or tampered with, as well as healing any damage done to our templates and preventing it from happening again. This is where the techniques of biospiritual development come in with the symbol, codes, sons, and especially working with the plasma level energies of our templates to help heal any dark flowering that might be occurring when one of these entities gets latched onto you, which normally starts happening at a deeper level when you have sex with them, and to also prevent any further infiltration in the future. Whether beings who are possessed by them can heal themselves from the infliction, I'm sure they can, but I'm sure they will be in for one hell of a fight, which I believe the plasma teachings from Miyasha at hayes.com will offer the best techniques and knowledge to help people out who believe they may be inflicted and have the conscious capacity to become aware of it and accept that as a reality and consciously work to bring themselves back from the brink of being completely taken over and used as a puppet for a demon fatale. This is why they were referred to as the fatale, because it was fatal for those who got dark flowered and unable to bring themselves back, as the entity will feed off your energy until you become weak enough for them to push you out of body, then run amok until it burns out of quanta and finds its next victim. Something I believe that started to happen with me and continued to add a new flavour to my already compromised system in the years following, which I did ultimately remedy through various techniques and downright hardy resilience. I really do pray for the two individuals to release themselves from these nasty entities, also implying they aren't actually fully embodied in snatch fatality already, and all beings for that matter who might be inflicted. So there were a few other interesting experiences during my time in Denver that unfolded, one of which was upon entering Jefferson County Court building to pick up a speeding ticket, where a hawk and pigeon crashed into the building 3 to 4 paces from entering the building at the ground main entrance, where it hit the big reflective glass windows with a huge thud that drew our attention upwards, where we then saw these two birds falling to the ground. The hawk fell into the garden bed to our right and on its back, and the pigeon on the pavement by the entrance to our left. Interestingly, Gemini was also stood to my left, symbolic of how we met, with her to my left holding hands in the dream state, and the painting of Horus and Hathor also having, Hathor to the left of Horus, wherein Horus relates to the hawk, and again, Hathor actually relates to the pigeon, as this is often associated with Venus, which I believe Hathor is linked to, which it is. That was being echoed in us, and now this event. Okay, as you can see there, that's the image. The top two photos on the left is the Jefferson County Court building. We walked over to the hawk to see it draw its last breath, as the impact and fall had killed it only seconds later, whereas the pigeon was alive but severely wounded and beat up. The approach to the building was very eerie, with a noticeable silence where we both commented on that fact before the poor birds hit the building. The reflection of the big glass windows obviously obscured and confused the vision of both birds, where the hawk was obviously attempting to capture the pigeon. The building itself looked like a five-star hotel from the highway, which was a rub in the face to the general public in regards to how much these corrupt corporate courts were making off the back of this fraudulent maritime amnesty system of law they had dragged everyone into. It was a bit of a shock, an ill omen that had dispelled and fed no energy to, but definitely had an architect behind it, given the timing. That was, very interesting. In another experience, I captured a cloaked ship that you can see there in the images. One time outside of our place, hovering in the sky amongst the other moving clouds for quite a few hours before disappearing one day. Of course, modern meteorologists would label them as lenticular clouds, which some may be, but others certainly could be bleed-throughs of interdimensional craft or craft using cloaking abilities. As Yasha stated in one of her lectures, that if the net was taken down, then all of space surrounding Earth would look like an ET parking lot. I also had an experience one night whilst on a jog where I saw 4 red lights appear in the sky toward the city that caught my attention. I stopped to observe the phenomenon, which prompted me to record it. These red orbs were hanging in the sky, with one descending to the ground whilst the other 3 held this triangle formation. The location of the descent I estimated to be near the Denver Broncos NFL stadium. Once the first orb disappeared from sight and into the ground, the others slowly followed in a spiral type format akin to a descending paratrooper. I looked online the following day for any games that might have been on and whether that was part of a halftime show stunt or practice, but nothing was on. Okay, you can see the images there on the bottom 2 center. That no doubt probably was UFOs or, related to some kind of MyLab, and there was some kind of hidden entrance that they descended into, which is kind of like near the stadium. Also came across an interesting book one time at Airbnb, which was titled The Number of the Beast by Robert A. Heinlein, as you can see there, which showed an entity that looked like Darth Maul out of Star Wars. The 666, as we have covered, is linked into the Beast technology of the fallen angelic black cube matrix, artificial static light field, death science, vampire wave technologies that connects our living matrix with Phantom and Weesadex at each of the 6 universal stargates. I also recall an astral experience with Gemini beneath Denver Airport, where we were walking along the gates where they showed different star systems like Andromeda, Antares, and Pleiades. These were the ones I recall seeing, with many people around with some ETs. I didn't see the mechanisms of how beings transported to these places, but I assume it was some sort of portal / Stargate technology. I also got the sense that Denver was the capital of Earth from an ET standpoint due to this connection with what's underneath the airport, with these so-called jump rooms and teleportation kind of gates and stations, right, which was really quite interesting and revealing. So 9/11, this was a weird experience, right? So there was a full moon on 9/11 2022, okay, or 11/9 if you're outside of America. The famous date of the Twin Towers, UIR War Edict and Pulse Technologies, they activated and sent through the grids that connected those sites, resulting in the pulverization of the 2 buildings, Building 7 and part of the Pentagon. It fell on a Saturday as well, okay, on this date in 2022. It was in the evening when taking the dog out where I noticed this strange light device on this windowsill in an apartment room on the opposite side of the courtyard. So I've circled it there, okay, so you can see where the arrow's going from is where I saw the light device, and 2 was where we were staying. It had that same tint of Luciferian light to it I'd encountered at Cuthberger that was very alien. Okay, it looked like a device mounted on a kind of tripod. This light, as I had found out whilst walking, was shooting a beam right into our room where we slept. I could see this as the beam only came into view as soon as I lined up with it. Otherwise, it just appeared similar to an iPhone light from other angles. Okay, so it was like a direct beam as soon as you kind of lined yourself with it. And I was able to look back and see that, oh my God, yeah, it's shining right into our bedroom. I was like, that's so strange. And that image at the top is kind of seeing, if you look out in the far distance, it was one of those buildings, I think near where that red car was actually. So up on that first level on the windowsill, it was shining right down. See where the stairs is, nearest to us on the right hand side. Our house was kind of like second from the corner. Okay, so it was like a beam going right into that house, as you can see there in the bottom image. It's a bit clearer. I mentioned this to Gemini and she could see the same thing going on. This was otherwise in a room which I had observed at times the funny lighting I'd been seeing in rooms ever since the Cannon Hill event, as I wrote about. As I went to bed that night, doing my Maharic shield to bolster my defenses and went off to sleep, I got to sleep around midnight, and not long after falling asleep, I must have had this experience where I was all of a sudden being held in some kind of suspension field in Earth's atmosphere, where my template and that of the Earth were starting to split and shatter into a million pieces. I immediately felt like this is a rapture experience, and I remember panicking and shouting out, "No, not like this, not like this, please no, please no," in the dream state, which obviously translated into some groans in my physical body as it prompted Gemini to shake me to wake me up. I came back in body with my heart pounding in this sense of missing time. I felt like it was early morning, but when I got up and checked the time, it was still before 1 a.m., only minutes after having gone to sleep. I remember just sat in the other room for a good half hour collecting my thoughts and all the dots of me being dragged out here, which really started the ball rolling to get me out of there. Basically, that was kind of like the final straw that broke the camel's back for me to put up with, okay, now I'm going to call it. This is definitely an infiltration attempt. This is just ridiculous. I need to get myself out of this union, right, out of this situation, or at least out of Denver. Upon reflection, I think that light device was used to implant in me the rapture timeline of what these fallen angelics wanted to manifest for Earth in our time matrix, so I could help give that encryption more energy. Regardless, it was another shocking experience of pure violation of my peace that no doubt was associated with ET Illuminati agents targeting me again. What was strange was that Gemini did not experience anything. They didn't target her, and context is key, as I positioned myself since 2020 to be a vessel for truth, openly and willfully combating the system with the work I was doing when decoding the legal and economic system, challenging authority, and ensuring my freedoms through many status correction technologies, having been done and sent into these guys whilst teaching others to do the same, exposing their fraudulent system. I'd aligned myself to the truth and made it my business. I put my neck on the line, and as they say, sacrifice is the measure of credibility. This undoubtedly made me a target, but compared to where Gemini had been aligned with, she was not using her platform to help expose the truth. She wasn't causing a stir with the establishment, even though she was aware of it, but had not made that transition to embodying the truth and being the change that was much needed on this planet. So in comparison, it was easy to see that the emphasis was firmly placed on me with the works I'd been doing, along with the codes I was carrying for this, stellar activation end times conflict drama, that added to frame the whole union as even more suspect in being an infiltration attempt. This was later confirmed to me in a very bizarre event that unfolded a few weeks later. I was cooking dinner one early evening, and I was reflecting on everything that had happened that year, and was speaking in my mind, to God to show me a sign if Gemini was an infiltrator, saying, "Please God, give me a sign." I repeated this over and over for a few minutes, where I suddenly heard Gemini yell out from the bedroom for help. I rushed in and saw she had come down with the cold sweats and was shivering convulsively. It was like an instant sign that I was gifted with, but I attended to her needs and helped settle her down. Turned out she got a bout of COVID. What was weird, upon her settling down, I went to the shop to get her a few things to help with her condition, and I stopped at some traffic lights where another guy pulled up with windows down, blaring some pastor preaching about the return of Christ and the kingdom of David. As soon as I went to grab my phone to record it, he changed the radio station. Now this is important because it was either that same day or the day before. We went for a walk and she stumbled upon an amulet of Jesus Christ left on the track by somebody and gave it to me and said that this was for me. It looked more like the real Jesus than the MCO AMCC teachings talk about, with the three Christ story, with Joshua 12 holding a staff draped in gold and green, pointing to his heart, or as a ray or a femur point, right, with the big gold and silver halo behind his head. That's what I mean. It was so weird with all these synchronicities of Jesus Christ and everything that was happening. Whether it was telling something about me as well, maybe the codes I'm carrying. Joshua 12 did leave behind 8 bloodlines, during his time here, and a lot of that, the K+8 factor Finborns are being born into. But it was just like all this subtle imagery, and she saw it. It was fresh. And what was interesting, there was a woman that we passed on the way up there, because it was a very isolated track. And this woman we passed had 2 dogs. One of the dogs I was immediately drawn to because it had like one blind white eye and one normal other eye, again symbolic of this kind of Luciferian Dajjal-like satanic force. But it was as if like she went up there, planted it, and then we came back up, moments later, and then she saw, "Oh, look at this," she goes, "Oh, this is for you." And I was like, "Okay, what is it?" It's like, yeah, symbolic of, what I've been learning at the time of Joshua 12, not the crucified Jesus, Arahabi, which is linked into the fallen Elohim guys, but the real Christic guardian Joshua 12 with the staff symbolic of him doing the grid work, didn't die on the cross, and otherwise ascended up through the Ark of the Covenant Stargate. Okay, so yeah, very interesting, very weird experience. Like I said, very weird year. In other words, that rapture event was, again, very, very strange. But again, thinking that they were trying to seed into like a holographic insert with that light device, me having that kind of experience to maybe help seed it in this reality, I'm not too sure. But there was definitely a timeline slip and shift after that experience, and me kind of being disorientated and feeling like so much time had gone missing, but it was only like, half an hour to an hour. So yeah, but that's what triggered me to be like, okay, right, how much more am I going to put up with being here, given, everything that's come before? I need to stop having a bleeding heart and stop ignoring all the signs and just, face the facts and start doing something about it, and just, take some time out. And that's obviously what started the ball rolling for me to get out of there. So it was another interesting synchronicity surrounding Jesus Christ, given that I had encountered quite a few when with her. I also got a download one night to punch into the Uniform Commercial Code, UCC, search online at Washington State, Jesus Christ, to see what sort of finding came up. Because I was studying law with the UCC, as securities have now replaced substance as collateral for debt, and how they have everyone floated as dead corporate fictions on paper. My logic was that this corporate empire probably extends and is part of a huge interstellar enterprise of commerce and slavery that has been going on. And if Jesus Christ were to come here, how would he try and free the people? Or rather, if J9 wanted to claim their estate, on behalf of Anu Elohim, they may do so via a filing, staking its claim for Earth and all of the beings on it, similar to how we see it portrayed in Jupiter Ascending. So I punched in Jesus Christ into the search function, and there was a filing that had taken place by this name. Of course, anyone can put that name down as a secure party creditor, but I thought it was interesting, and indeed it was. The filing I downloaded listed all of the debtors as being all of the major nations of the world, along with Mountbatten, Windsor, King Charles III, and the Vatican City, Holy See. The assigners were listed as God, residing in heaven, the United Nations, New York, and the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. I think we can already deduct who is behind this filing, especially after revealing more of the information I came across that revealed gold and the Bermuda Triangle, where the black hole portals are located to the Phantom and WeStack black hole matrix. Okay, so there you can see a screenshot of the filing, and on the bottom there you can see the assigner, and the secure party, and a little link, right, a YouTube link beneath Christ Jesus as secure party that led me to some more interesting information connected into this. So I think for me, the cat was out of the bag as to who was really behind this little stunt when they instructed the leaders to take all of the gold off planet via the Bermuda Triangle wormholes that has been catalogued by the MCO AIMCC teachings, as we have gone through, as being gateways to the Phantom Matrix and port interface networks as a result of the fall of Atlantis during the last stellar activation cycle 25,000 years ago. It was like, busted, caught you. As we have covered, the Anunnaki on Nibiru, as well as probably other planets they inhabit, like Tiamat, Phantom, Arcturus, etc., right, have to mine for gold and use it to sustain their atmosphere and immortality. I've also heard Iyasha mention how the gold was used to transfer life essence from a baby once born into the gold for it to be stored and later used by these races. This could give more credence to the saying, you are worth your weight in gold, and this belief that the monetary equivalent of your weight in gold when you are born, with that then being deposited in trust and reflecting the energy that had been taken from you. Again, as we confirmed before, this is basically where we get our value of gold from, because it is from these alchemical processes that they use with monatomic gold and white powder gold especially to extract soul subatomic energy from beings who are connected into that within the system, and to also sustain their immortality and their atmosphere. Okay, because whatever is in the atmosphere is almost like what they breathe in, helps sustain their immortal bodies. Okay, so it all goes into this energy harvesting process. That the only reason why we give value to gold is because of these guys, because they value it, because they need it in order to siphon energy to sustain their existence. Regardless, I think we may have seen a covert instruction set from fallen angelic legions to the human level Illuminati management team who put that filing and video together for the minions to follow. Of course, all in the name of God, probably Jehovah with Jeshua 9 or Lucifer playing the role of the sun in this instance. I'll paste the documents that were shared on Google Drive below for entertainment purposes with the goals they had in mind, which makes for interesting reading. Okay, so this channel was otherwise taken down not too long after me doing a video on my YouTube about this, okay, where I screenshotted all of it and revealed the whole story behind what was going on here and reading it all out. Okay, but in my book, I basically copy and pasted all of the points of the PDF that this presentation was otherwise based on. But interestingly, when I came to view the website, it was called Judgment Day. It was unlisted, so the only way you can view this is if you had access to the private link. And there was 144 views, right? And it had the categories, the second coming of Jesus Christ, God's judgment, task list for every leader of every nation, changes to the global banking system, new rules for the gold industry worldwide, and the PDF document that was otherwise the basis for this kind of automated slideshow that was just reading through what was otherwise on that document. Okay, so very interesting, very revealing, and otherwise absolutely connected into these fallen angelic lot using their version of Jesus Christ, right, mockery, in order to get people moving under the guise of God, right? Anunnaki being the Illuminati and the Freemasonics God. If you look at a Freemasonic Bible in the back, they're often depicted a lot of the Anunnaki, okay, as well. So it was all done under subterfuge in order to get things happening on Earth. Whether that actually took place or not, I've got no way of knowing in regards to the inventory of gold before and after this event, whether they did take those Navy ships and also look at Navy ships, what happened to those Navy ships, right? If they were basically instructed to put forward a skeleton crew, sail, load up as much gold as they possibly can. I think it was like 4.5 tons maybe on each vessel, or as much as they can, and sail towards the Bermuda. Once they're there, leave with the skeleton crew via helicopter, and God will take care of the rest. Okay, which means their spaceships would have zapped the ship into wherever they needed to zap it to, and then extract the gold in order to use for their purposes, right? Mainly to sustain their immortality. So who knows? Maybe if you do a bit of digging, you might be able to see that the inventory of gold diminished before and certainly after this event took place. But yeah, maybe they're going to cloak that as well and manipulate the records and the numbers of the gold stock. But yeah, very interesting. So I end the chapter on the Great Pyramid of Giza and the Ark of the Covenant Stargate dream. So on Christmas, New Year's Eve 2022, I had another interesting experience regarding JC, this time in the dream state after reading about the pyramids of Giza and the Ark of the Covenant Stargates in Voyages 2. By this point, I had decided to have a break and booked my flights to return home to England in order to have some time and space to process everything going on in my life. I spent Christmas and New Year's Eve on my own in Denver, spending my time reading about the true Christ story according to MCO AMCC teachings and reflecting on another challenging but eventful year. I think it was literally on New Year's Eve and or the previous night where I had this dream experience after reading about Joshua 12's story and how he apparently ascended up through the Ark of the Covenant Stargate that was located inside the Great Pyramid when he turned 39 years old, which would have been in 27 AD, given that he was born in 12 BC. I was all of a sudden lucid inside the Great Pyramid in a chamber that was very ancient but had this very high-tech feel about it. There was another woman present who was on the opposite side of this raised stone rectangular slab that looked to be some kind of control panel. On the wall opposite were lots of hieroglyphics. Weirdly, my mother was there with me in the background that I could see in my periphery. The woman was explaining to me that this is the Stargate that Jesus used to ascend, and she showed me a small rectangular depression within the control panel where the Stargate tool goes in order to operate it. She was emphasizing that without this tool, you cannot select the space-time coordinates of where you want to go. I woke up with an extra message of, it's like having a car. Without a steering wheel, you must need that tool in order to operate it effectively. Reading about the history in Voyages 2 had obviously triggered that experience, which Yasha writes a detailed account of the origin and main purpose of the pyramids being to anchor the Ark of the Covenant Stargates to allow for portal travel and the use of highly advanced energy through the Stargate tools, such as the UNCs, in order to heal, build, and modulate the weather, where she writes, open quote, concern for the welfare of the inner Earth civilizations and the high concentration of Anu Melchizedeks residing there, the Anunnaki of the Syrian Council petitioned the Interdimensional Association of Free Worlds for permission to make a show of strength on Earth, offering the races protection against the increasing Anunnaki resistance infiltration. Permission was granted, and the Syrian Arcturian Coalition for Interplanetary Defense was called in to assist in this protective mission. The primary target for Anunnaki resistance manipulation was the area in which the Ark of the Covenant was located, so Egypt became the focus of Syrian Council activity. Anunnaki of the Syrian Council were first sent to the planet Mars to recreate an observational outpost that had been constructed there during the 1,000 Years' War, which they hoped would intimidate the Anunnaki resistance from further interference with Earth. Undaunted by the presence of the Syrian Council, the Anunnaki resistance escalated their involvement with Atlantis and began a resurgence of their influence in Egypt, posing a greater threat to the security of the Ark of the Covenant. About 48,500 years ago, the Syrian Council instructed their Anunnaki members to make a direct show of power in Egypt and Atlantis. Anunnaki of the Syrian Council visited these civilizations en masse, reasserting the influence of the Law of One and driving many Templar Anu out of Egypt and back to Atlantis, where they would pose less threat to the Ark of the Covenant. In Egypt and in several other locations on the globe, the portals of the inner earth were fortified as the Syrian Council Anunnaki built bases of operations on Earth's surface directly over the portal regions. The pyramid structure was a trademark of Anunnaki architecture and scientific achievement, and several small pyramid structures were constructed above portal passage areas throughout Egypt. The greatest of these operation bases was constructed over the main Egyptian portal opening to the inner earth, through which the Ark of the Covenant portal could be accessed. At the same time, another massive structure was constructed over the nearby portal of the Ark of the Covenant. The first monument to be created was the original Sphinx. This building covered the portal to the inner earth and linked directly into the portal passage that led to the Ark of the Covenant. The Sphinx was designed following Anunnaki heritage, having the head of an Anunnaki warrior placed upon the body of a lion-like sculpture. The lion's body of the Sphinx was a symbolic tribute to a race of beings from Harmonic Universe 2, known as the Leonines, who were instrumental in laying the early foundations of Anunnaki culture. The Leonine beings of HU2, who were large, upright, fur-covered felines of advanced intelligence, were revered as godlike by the early Anunnaki civilizations, and the Anunnaki of the Syrian Council paid tribute to this heritage. The Anunnaki of the Syrian Council drew strength and comfort from their affiliation with the Leonine people, and by constructing this monument, intended to show the power of the Anunnaki united and built upon their Leonine ancestral allies. The symbolic design of the Sphinx was intended to show the Anunnaki resistance that they were alone in their conquest, and that the true Anunnaki heritage stood behind the Anunnaki of the Syrian Council. In practical terms, the Sphinx was constructed to serve as a fortification for the inner earth portal, and also as a safe house and library for the storage of sacred records and texts. It also served the purpose of housing the great energy transmitting machines that were charged with ultra-high frequency, fifth-dimensional energy from the Ark of the Covenant, and the smaller unks, which were infused with energy in a similar fashion. Historically, the larger machines became known as Arks of the Covenant, and the true identity of the Ark of the Covenant as being a portal bridge was lost. But during the time of the original building of the Sphinx, the truth of the Ark of the Covenant was well known, and the objects were understood as tools which could draw, hold and transmit energy that was drawn through the Ark of the Covenant from the blue flame of Amenti that was stored in the Andromeda Galaxy. Both the large and small tools were designed in the shape of the Ankh, which allowed high-frequency energy to be synthesized in specific ways, following the natural laws of interdimensional energy mechanics. The Ankhs were used to create the Sphinx, various pyramids, and other structures, as they provided the power to reverse gravitational pull and directly affect the particle makeup and morphogenetic fields of Earth's matter substance. They served as major construction tools, weather modulators, healing tools, and as interdimensional transit devices. The original Sphinx served as a protective fortress in which these devices could be stored and kept out of the hands of the Templar Anu. The second major construction of the Syrian Council Anunnaki was a massive pyramid centered directly over the portal opening to the Ark of the Covenant. This pyramid was originally constructed during the same time period as the Sphinx, about 48,459 years ago, which is about 46,459 BC. The reconstruction of this pyramid, which occurred about 12,450 years ago, which is in 10,500 BC, then again about 11,000 years ago, which was 9,000 BC, is what has come to be known in modern times as the Great Pyramid of Giza, the Cheops Pyramid. This structure was reconstructed and repaired on numerous occasions. It was designed and erected by the Anunnaki of the Syrian Council, the Anu Melchizedek, Hebrew and Serious Egyptian peoples from that time period. The pyramid was not constructed to serve as a burial tomb, though much later it was used as such. The primary purpose of the Great Pyramid of Giza was to fortify the portal of the Ark of the Covenant and to serve as an interdimensional teleportation center. The original pyramid was designed as a harmonic resonance chamber through which multi-dimensional frequency bands could be pulled in from deep space and from the planetary core of Sirius B using a great Ankh positioned directly below a crystalline capstone. Through the power of the Ankh, a tremendous amount of ultra-high frequency energy was pulled into focus within the capstone of the pyramid, then projected downward through the structure into the second dimensional frequency bands. The pyramid and Ark of the Covenant were situated upon Earth's geographical center point within the energy vortex that represented the heart chakra within Earth's planetary bioenergetic system. This vortex allowed energy exchange to take place between Earth and the fourth dimensional frequency bands. By creating a harmonic resonance chamber within such an interdimensional vortex, the D2 overtones of HU1 could be combined with the bass tones of D4 in HU2, forming an interdimensional resonant tone through which visiting craft traveling from Sirius B and other star systems could enter and leap through time, making transit to Earth almost instantaneously. The Great Pyramid was created to allow immediate intervention of the Sirian Council and Galactic Federation fleets should the Ark of the Covenant come under Anunnaki resistance attack. While the pyramid was in operation as an interstellar teleport station, it served as the greatest deterrent in an Anunnaki resistance invasion. The Great Pyramid was used as an active interstellar teleport station from the time of its construction, 48,459 years ago, to about 30,000 years ago, which is about 28,000 BC, when an explosion in Atlantis caused Earth to tilt slightly on its axis, knocking the pyramid's D4 vortex, Earth's heart chakra, out of its previous alignment with the vortex systems of Sirius B and several other planetary systems to which it had been originally aligned. ET visitation was commonplace in Egypt prior to this misalignment of the Earth's grid, but following this event, transit from other star systems required more time and resources, so visitation became much less frequent. Throughout the height of its operation, which is between 46,459 BC and 28,000 BC, the Great Pyramid of Giza was also used as an ascension chamber for the select few who possessed the required DNA assembly in favour of the Elohim. Such individuals were allowed passage through the Ark of the Covenant if the Elohim approved and opened the passageway, and some were able to ascend to Tara. The pyramid was also kept under tight security by the resident Anunnaki of the Sirian Council, and the Templar Anu were banned from entering the premises. This created much hostility between the Templar Anu and the Egyptian cultures operating under the protection of the Sirian Council Anunnaki. The Anunnaki of the Sirian Council developed a strong hold in Egypt for a time, creating a system of pyramids and other structures that housed a network of power points through which energy was drawn from the great crystals of Atlantis through the Earth's grid lines and into desired locations. About 35,000 years ago, the pure Melchizedek cloister race began their first full birthing wave into human civilization, reinforcing the teachings of the Law of One and bringing their fifth DNA strand potentials into the human genetic pool. Guardians of the Ark of the Covenant was slowly turned over from the Syrian Anunnaki to the Anu Melchizedeks, cloister Melchizedeks, Hebrew, hybrids of fifth race cloister Hebrew and the sixth race cloister Melchizedeks, created through the host matrix transplants of the second seeding, and the Ceres Egyptians, all of whom became members of the early Egyptian priestcraft. Since the times of their creation, the sphere of Amenti, which is 550 million years ago, and the Ark of the Covenant, 840,000 years ago, were the primary foci of human evolution, as the purpose and process of the human evolutionary imprint was held within the secrets of Amenti. End quote. Now, I write, it's interesting to see the interpretations from the authors who write about the pyramids and Sphinx from a purely philosophical and earth science viewpoint, as compared to the claims made by E. Asher in a Voyages 2 book, along with numerous lectures. The pyramids acting as a harmonic resonance chamber, helping to anchor high interdimensional energy that connects Earth into interstellar way stations of time portal travel, is certainly entertained in many New Age circles and serious researchers. The idea that a highly advanced civilization did exist, with highly advanced tools, is the only rational explanation as to how these pyramids were built. Many people agree that Egypt is the heart chakra of the Earth within the New Age communities. But how did they get to know this? It seems a lot of the New Age, as mentioned before, have been springboarded to help control the highly advanced teachings coming through from Iasha as part of the MCO AMCC councils and stellar activation cycle alignment we are in order to mix it with the Metatronic fallen sciences. A lot of that information has trickled down into the New Age as fragments of the truth, with much of it also coming back through individuals who are activating the dormant DNA strands and remembering the truth. But there have certainly been many authors prior to Iasha's time who revealed the mystical nature of their presence. One such author is Manly P. Hall, who writes the following about the Great Pyramid and Sphinx from his book The Secret Teachings of All Ages. In regards to the Sphinx, he writes, open quote, "There is still another answer to the riddle of the Sphinx, an answer best revealed by consideration of the Pythagorean values of numbers Okay, the 4, the 2, and the 3 produce the sum of 9, which is the natural number of man and also of the lower worlds. The 4 represents the ignorant man, the 2 the intellectual man, and 3 the spiritual man. Infant humanity walks on 4 legs, evolving humanity on 2 legs, and to the power of his own mind, the redeemed and illumined Magus adds the staff of wisdom. The Sphinx is therefore the mystery of nature, the embodiment of the secret doctrine, and all who cannot solve a riddle perish. To pass the Sphinx is to attain personal immortality. End quote. And then in another passage he writes, open quote, W. Harmon, by a series of extremely complicated yet exact mathematical calculations, determines that the first ceremonial of the pyramid was performed 68,890 years ago, on the occasion when the star Vega for the first time sent its rays down the descending passage into the pit. End quote. And another passage to quote, the entire pyramid is an example of perfect orientation and actually squares the circle. This last is accomplished by dropping a vertical line from the apex of the pyramid to its baseline. If this vertical line be considered as the radius of an imaginary circle, the length of the circumference of such a circle will be found to equal the sum of the baselines of the 4 sides of the pyramid. The sides of the pyramid face the 4 cardinal angles, the latter signifying, according to Eliphas Levi, the extremities of light and darkness, east and west. The base of the pyramid further represents the 4 material elements or substances from the combinations of which the quaternary body of man is formed. From each side of the square there rises a triangle, typifying the threefold divine being enthroned within every quaternary material nature. If each baseline be considered a square, from which ascends a threefold spiritual power, then the sum of the lines of the 4 faces, 12, and the 4 hypothetical squares, 16, constituting the base, is 28, the sacred number of the lower world. If this be added to the 3 septenaries composing the sun, 21, it equals 49, okay, the square of 7, and the number of the universe. The 12 signs of the zodiac, like the governors of the lower worlds, are symbolized by the 12 lines of the 4 triangles, the faces of the pyramid. In the midst of each face is one of the beasts of Ezekiel, and the structure as a whole becomes the cherubim. The 3 main chambers of the pyramid are related to the heart, the brain, and the generative system, the spiritual centers of the human constitution. End quote. And in another passage, open quote, the pyramid may be likened to the universe and the capstone to man. Following the chain of analogy, the mind is the capstone of man, the spirit the capstone of the mind, and God, the epitome of the whole, the capstone of the spirit. As a rough and unfinished block, man is taken from the quarry and by the secret culture of the mysteries gradually transformed into a true and perfect pyramidal capstone. The temple is complete only when the initiate himself becomes the living apex through which the divine power is focused into the diverging structure below. Through the mystic passageways and chambers of the Great Pyramid past the illumined of antiquity, they entered its portals as men, they came forth as gods, it was the place of the second birth, the womb of the mysteries, and wisdom dwelt in it as God dwells in the heart of men. The technique of the mysteries was unfolded by the sage illuminator, the master of the secret house. The power to know his guardian spirit was revealed to the new initiate. The method of disentangling his material body from his divine vehicle was explained, and to consummate the magnum opus, there was revealed the divine name, the secret and unutterable designation of the supreme deity, by the very knowledge of which man and his God are made consciously one. With the giving of the name, the new initiate became himself a pyramid, within the chamber of whose soul numberless other human beings might also receive spiritual enlightenment. End quote. Not much is revealed about the presence of extraterrestrials or metaterrestrials, nor the technologies that connect them through the form of stargates and portals in Mani's works. The mysteries are just that, somewhat a mystery, which is categorized under spirituality, cloaked in symbolic language, which entertains the artist and right brain in all of us, which is often left to the initiate to work out. Some of the aspects of the science relating to the dimensions of the pyramid do offer great philosophical insight as to this concept of as above, so below, as within, so without, which is important when realizing that all is mind, or as the Egyptian mysteries dubbed, all is atum, a reference to the atom that composes all things, which leads one to the minute units of God consciousness that forms all of manifest creation, the particle units. Thus hidden in the very structures of grand buildings, we can find similar correspondences to our own divine vessels. Pyre is also reference to fire, and mid being the root of the word middle. Thus we have cloaked in the word pyramid itself a symbolic reference to the fire in the middle, which is another reference to the heart, it being linked to the sun in astrology, where it domiciles in Leo, fixed fire, Leo the lion heart, as well as the main fiery center in our bodies, which is the heart. Another link to Leo, the Leonine races, and the Sphinx, who seems to be at the heart of a lot of inspiration and influence in Egypt to do with the feline form. We can see, given the tilt of the Earth, due to the cataclysms that resulted in Atlantis, Earth, and thus humanity's heart, have been thrown out of alignment with the natural divine order of how God source originally intended eternal life Christic systems to be. We can thus look within ourselves and see that our hearts are out of alignment, positioned off center and slightly to the left in everyone's temple. A reminder that even though we may appear separate in forms of the body of our planet, Earth, we both share the same likeness and structures in our anatomy and templates that are sympathetic to one another. A salient point to take away that Manny certainly reiterates throughout much of his works, as he says, and is good to re-emphasize when doing the necessary spiritual work and integration, open quote, the new initiate became himself a pyramid, within the chambers of whose soul numberless other human beings might also receive spiritual enlightenment, end quote. A goal we can all set to achieve for ourselves in order to help uplift humanity when accomplishing the great work, when aligning with your authentic eternal self and purpose. However, as we have decoded and gone over information relating to the fallen priesthoods and mystery schools, none more so than with the Templar Anu and the whole Freemasonic secret society setup, with their patriarchal dominant tone and ties with the fallen races, I still feel much of Manny P. Hall's work is orientated more toward this twist in the teachings and should be read with the discernment when possessing the greater body of works from the AMCC teachings. There seems to be an overwhelming patriarchal dominance and male gender tone symbolic of the Anu Elohim Saturnian doctrines of the Anu Melchizedek's rite, especially given the Kabbalah cosmogeny that's pushed and his works leading him to joining the Freemasons. I thought it's important to mention that, okay, that even though there's a lot of good wisdom to glean from it in regards to some of these interpretations from a spiritual perspective, it has got a heavy taint of the Anu Melchizedek, Templar Anu, Fallen Jehovian, Anu Elohim, Kabbalistic, fallen black hole sciences and philosophies with that. So David Wilcock in his book The Source Field Investigations has a great chapter on the Great Pyramids that blends the science with spirituality and prophecy. He writes in the Great Pyramid that, open quote, approximately 2.3 million limestone and granite blocks were used to build it, each of them weighing 2.5 to 70 tons apiece, for a total mass of about 6.3 million tons. No crane ever built in modern times is strong enough to lift stones this heavy. It would simply tumble over, end quote. Otherwise alluding to the use of advanced technologies in its construction, especially given that the precision in which the casing stones, with some of them weighing in at 16 tons, were carved to fit together perfectly, that the cracks between them were only 1/50th of an inch wide, narrower than a human fingernail, with David commenting that, open quote, Richard C. Hoagland has pointed out that even the tiles on a NASA space shuttle do not fit together this closely, end quote. He also alludes to this concept of the missing capstone being symbolic of how, just like the Earth and humanity is somewhat unfinished, in that the final piece will be completed in Earth's and humanity's evolution upon the completion of the Great Year, which is this 26,000 year cycle involved with the processional slippage and alignment of the cherubim, or the four faces of God in Leo, the lion, Scorpio, the eagle, Taurus, the bull, and Aquarius, the man, and the stellar activation cycle that occurs given the Stargate alignments. Moreover, he found that when measuring the diagonals of the pyramid from one corner over the top and to another, they add up to 25,826.4 pyramid inches, which is remarkably close to the Great Year cycle. He speculates that the end of the Great Year would somehow involve the awakening of the pineal gland and the end of the Iron Age for humanity and a birth into a new age of enlightenment called the Golden Age. He quotes the Sibyl of Cumae, who broke up history in a series of ages and referred to the last age as the Cumaean song, which also has in its texts the Latin origins for the famous quote positioned on the United States $1 bill, open quote, the last age of Cumaean song now comes, Novus Ordo Seclorum, altered from Magnus Seclorum Ordo. A mighty order of ages is born anew, both the prophetic virgin and Saturnian kingdoms now return. Now a new progeny is let down from the lofty heavens, favour, chaste, Lucina, the boy soon to be born in whom the Iron Age shall come to an end, and the golden one shall arise again in the whole earth, end quote. Interesting note how this prophecy relates to Saturn and the Saturnian kingdoms being responsible for ushering in this golden age, which aligns with the age of Aquarius. David Wilcock's lens of translating prophecies is more of a positive one, which aligns with the millennial kingdom and 1,000 years of peace mentioned in the Bible, along with the Crystal River failsafe host and the MCO AMCC teachings of the 900-year or so Bridgestone project. However, as good as the science seems to be in the research, no one can boldly make claims to the kind of things Iasha has written about with our history and technology unless it's completely made up, or, highly more likely, it's actually coming from records held and transmitted in a way modern science may be years away from discovering and becoming mainstream. That is, via interdimensional holographic discs that store information that we can access if we are given clearance on them or know how to read them, as well as accessing their own personal historical records stored away in our junk DNA and Akashic records, which I can imagine would be similar crystalline holographic discs of information we can all learn how to access, something we can look forward to verifying in the future if it is true, as we gain back the abilities necessary to access them in this final end times conflict drama ascension cycle. Again, as I've alluded to before many times, this drama supposedly has been escalated and expedited to start happening now, with things that were scheduled to happen 900 years to 1,000 years time. Okay, so things are speeding up rapidly, and so we're going to see a lot of changes and transitions happen. And so far, as of recording this, given the latest dispensations from arheus.com, we're in April 2025, that we are on a evac notice, okay, which means that things are starting to shift very quickly, and those who can get up and out and through the portals that are opening under the Divine Protectorate can, in the future timeline of portions of Earth that have already ascended and reintegrated into Eartha, which is back up in the Andromeda M31 galaxy, okay, from which our Milky Way galaxy had originally fallen from. All right, folks, so that wraps up chapter 17. It's a big chapter, so well done if you made it this far. A lot to unpack. Obviously, couldn't read all of it from my book, so I highly recommend, if you want even more detailed snippets with what I write about, to purchase my book, okay, and read through it. But otherwise, yeah, covered the main topics of my first-hand experiences and research. That's all for consideration. That's very interesting. So I'll see you over in the final chapter, which is chapter 18 next, where we're going to be covering the year of 2023 and obviously coming up into 2024 into the present day. Sekhmet, more Jesus Christ things, believe it or not, the 777 shift, the deity plans, the D-span 777 gates, and the Alhambra cathedral networks, dragon races, demons and mirrors, Bali and the 777 fold, Typhon, using the blood of Jesus Christ, one experience, again, which kind of threw a spanner in the works with what was going on with the Three Christ story and what I've kind of was led to believe, right, which we'll talk about. The failsafe path of mercy and the zero tolerance, Wesadek green dragons and Cassius the croc, Jesus Alhambra shield host, and the Jehovah's trumpet outpitcher schedule. All right, folks, so I look forward to that one. In the meantime, stay safe, stay sovereign as always, and I'll see you there in chapter 18. Ciao for now.